She saved the world and defeated the Demon King. But her fiancé cheated on her right before their wedding. So she ran away from the kingdom, and the hero who traveled with her decided to stay by her side. And that's where the story begins. In the throne room, a little girl in a blue dress with short black hair stands before the old king, and behind her stands a woman in modest clothing. The king tells the girl, named Lacey, that her power is too great and cannot remain unchecked. Therefore, holding her hand, he uses magic to mark the back of her palm with a symbol. This clearly causes the girl pain. She closes her eyes and cries out, so the woman behind her prevents her from pulling away prematurely by placing her hands on her fragile shoulders. The king says that this symbol is proof of Lacey's contract, that she must devote her life to the country. The child agrees to this. Several years later, a flock of wyverns soars in the sky. One of the squad members, Brooks, notices them. He reports this to the hero, Wayne. Wayne orders the squad to focus on the black hound they have been fighting, while he watches the enemies in the sky. The lizards are too high up, so he orders Lacey, who is nearby and hiding under the hood of her cloak, to strike them with lightning. But not too hard. The grown girl flinches slightly at the guy's shout, but then she recites a spell, strikes the ground with her staff, right in the center of the magic circle that has appeared, and a similar circle appears in the sky, but larger. A pillar of magic bursts from the center of the circle, instantly destroying all the wyverns. Brooks is delighted. Dana from the squad asks Lacey if she is all right. She receives an affirmative answer. Wayne is stunned. The power of the Witch of Dawn, as he calls Lacey, staring wide-eyed at her figure in the smoke from the spell. A year later, Kuroiza Kingdom, capital city. Lacey makes her way through the crowd of townspeople, slightly hunched over, pulling the hood of her cloak over her head and clutching tightly to her staff, which is curved at the end and decorated with intertwined ribbon. The girl notices such a large number of people, as if it were some kind of holiday. On the way, she awkwardly bumps into a passerby, is almost knocked over by running children with a small dog, and steps on the tail of a young witch's resting cat. Lacey is about to go home to do some magical research. She is startled by a loud voice asking for the Witch of Dawn. She turns around at the sound. The girl calms down, realizing that it is just a crowd gathered around an artist, asking him for the paintings they want. The man is selling paintings depicting members of the hero's team. Watching this, the girl thinks about how much excitement there is for these images, and also that it really is a celebration. Lacey is lost in memories of how the Demon King was revived 10 years ago. Because of this, monsters flooded the world and ravaged the land. This dangerous opponent was defeated a month ago by a squad from the kingdom of Kuroizu, which included the hero Wayne, who was chosen as the Sacred Sword, the Steel Warrior Brooks, and the Saint Dana. And Lacey herself, who was called the Witch of Dawn. She almost never appeared in public, so her appearance was imagined by people and did not resemble Lacey herself at all. For example, everyone believed that she had scarlet hair and was incredibly beautiful. This plays into the girl's hands, as she can calmly go out into the city and not even be noticed. On her way home, the girl thinks about the fact that there is no point in conducting magical research now that the Demon King has been defeated. After all, she is bound by contract to the kingdom, and her only goal was to destroy the enemy. Now, on leave until her next orders, she doesn't know what to do with herself. Having already turned her back on the crowd with thoughts of returning home, Lacey hears the artist exclaim that there are only a couple of portraits left. So she turns around and buys 4 engravings for herself. The girl looks very happy and hugs her purchases, thinking that sometimes you can treat yourself because she rarely buys anything for herself. Although it was not easy for her because the witch is shy around people, so she trembled as she handed the payment to the artist. Walking through the busy streets of the city, Lacey looks at the paintings she bought, thinking about her former comrades in arms. She realizes that they will not get together anytime soon because they are heroes. She also wonders if Dana and Brooks made it home because they are probably celebrating there too. A smile appears on the mage's face. The girl recalls a moment from one of their stops when she and Wayne watched Dana and Brooks have a small argument. She joined them on orders, but the Witch of Dawn admits that that time was charming in its own way. The girl admits that she misses those times, even if she is the only one who does. However, she is still overcome with some anxiety, wondering if she will be recognized. She is depicted differently in all the paintings. The witch is interrupted from her thoughts by someone calling out to her to watch her step, lest she fall. Looking up from the paintings, Lacey sees Wayne standing in front of her. The guy smiles at her and greets her. His expression changes almost immediately. He points out her friend's pallor, suggesting that she has forgotten to eat again. The girl does not give a clear answer. The action moves to a park with a fountain, where children are playing, townspeople are strolling, and the tower of a large building is visible through the treetops. Lacey eats her sandwich carefully, while she and Wayne are sitting on a bench. The guy watches the girl eat, saying that she should eat slowly, to which she gives a short agreement. The guy also asks why the girl bought paintings of their team. She replies that it was just nostalgia, and also informs him that Dana and Brooks have already left the capital. While Wayne looks at the paintings, Lacey says that his portrait is now the most popular, but this does not interest her companion much. In turn, he asks why the Dawn, which has once again been painted looking completely different from the real thing. But after thinking about it, he decides that maybe it's better this way. Lacey is a little upset, as she decides that the guy thinks the paintings wouldn't sell as well with her real face, but he objects, saying that it's better for her to live that way. After all, Wayne himself is too recognizable and cannot leave the house without using the magic of disguise. That is, an illusion that makes his face inconspicuous, but does not work on those whose magic is stronger, including Lacey. He also says that he cannot use it at official receptions, so everyone stares at him there. The young man adds that such attention was tolerable on missions, but receptions at the castle are a nightmare. The girl agrees with this, continuing to eat. After all, he is a former hero and a nobleman at that, so he always has a lot of work to do. These thoughts make the witch wonder why he is here at all. She concludes that it must be for business. She asks him directly, looking at Wayne, and he replies that he heard Lacey dismiss the servants and sold the house. This makes him worry whether she is alive. The goddess looks slightly concerned. He says that if she is left alone, she will forget to eat and sleep while practicing her magic, and that he has come to understand this well during his travels. That a witch can easily kill herself without proper supervision. Lacey tries to argue, but she stumbles and turns away, knowing that her friend is right. The girl remembers how Wayne took care of her during the journey, and she assumes that if she had a mother, she would be like Wayne. At least, that's what she thinks. A slight smile touches her lips at these thoughts, and a slight blush appears on her cheeks. While she is lost in thought, the young man offers to buy her something else to eat and examines her slightly tousled, tangled hair, in which he finds crumbs, saying, more to himself than to her, that he should have brought a comb. They buy a drink at the nearest kiosk and sit down on the bench again. At this moment, Wayne asks why she sold the house in the first place. After all, it was a gift from the king. Lacey takes a sip from her glass and replies that since the journey is over, it's time to get her life in order. Then she looks at the guy and adds that she wanted to try living alone. She had never been alone on her travels, so this was a new experience for her. Wayne clearly doesn't share his friend's enthusiasm about this, but he doesn't say anything. Then he thinks for a moment. He looks at the witch and offers her a place to stay. Wayne offered her his country house, where the girl would be more comfortable. There are many books, delicious food, even a dog. The manager will not interfere, and the witch will be able to do as she pleases. It's more comfortable than the inn, and it's free. The girl sees the logic in this. She thanks the guy, but refuses because such a life would not last long. Until her wedding. The young people look at each other, and Lacey speaks about it calmly, with a slight smile. Wayne looks slightly surprised by this news. Her fiancé is Lamond from the ducal family of Dejafun. The Witch of Dawn reminds Wayne that this has been discussed before. The young man says he remembers something like that. Lacey says that he recently came to the castle to greet her after her return. She then recalls the day of that meeting. The girl was asked to wait. She was left on a sofa in a luxurious hall. She thinks that every time she comes to the castle, everything shines so brightly that it's like she's stepping into a treasure chest. The girl was clearly nervous. Despite wearing her best dress, Lacey still feels like a stranger in this wealth. The opening door snaps her out her thoughts. Lamond enters the hall and greets his future bride, saying that he is glad to see her safe and sound. Lacey greets him in return with a slight bow. The guy says that everyone in the capital is talking about the team of heroes and that many of his acquaintances are fans of the Witch of Dawn. However, he doesn't know how to tell them the truth, because everyone knows the rumors about the red-haired beauty. This remark clearly upsets Lacey, but she chooses to remain silent. Lamond notices the girl's staff leaning against the sofa. The girl hastily apologizes, getting ready to put it away, but the young man says it's okay. True, despite the fact that she killed many demons and monsters. Thanks to this, she saved the world, and he is proud of her. But the smell of demon blood has no place in his home, and he asks Lacey to get rid of it. She has no choice but to agree, looking at her weapon with some sadness and clutching it tightly in her hands. Lacey knows that, in fact, the engagement of a duke and a commoner is impossible, but Lamond personally begged the king for it. After all, high magical power is an indicator of status for the nobility. And now that the demon king has been defeated, she is expected to give birth to an heir to whom she will pass on her power. This is the last role she has been assigned. Thinking about this, Lacey visibly darkens, taking another sip of her drink. Wayne looks at her. Then he calls out to her, forcing her to leave her memories behind. He reminds her of the king's offer. Any reward for defeating the enemy. The girl didn't ask for anything, and the guy asked if she had changed her mind. She smiles slightly and puts down her glass, and picks up her staff. She says she still doesn't need anything, but she has a request for Wayne himself. The young witch asks him to burn the staff with magic, because she cannot take it with her to the Duke's house. She herself has not been able to bring herself to do it. Despite her resolute tone, Lacey's hands tremble as she speaks. Her friend notices this and refuses to do it. After all, this staff is very dear to her. The girl accepts this answer with a smile, but thinks to herself that she will ask another time. After all, the staff must be destroyed. It is her last duty. She thinks again. The role for which she existed was to destroy the Demon King. Her journey with her friends, her life as a magician, had come to an end. Evening slowly descends on the city. Wayne offers to walk the girl to the tavern. The city lights are already lit, and townspeople stroll along the illuminated cobblestone streets. On the way, Lacey's companion asks what kind of person her fiancé is. After all, she only knows his name. The guy also says that she can't be completely uninterested in her chosen one. This makes her mentally compare Wayne to her mother, who is testing her future son-in-law, but at the same time, she feels slightly embarrassed. She herself knows little about Lamond, as their conversations have been very superficial. The young witch begins to describe the Lord. Dark blonde hair, brown eyes. He is slightly taller than Wayne and very thin. While his girlfriend is talking, he turns his attention elsewhere. The girl also adds that her fiancé is about 10 years older than her, which allows the swordsman to assume that he is about 25 years old. Suddenly, he points to a man in the crowd accompanied by a young lady as an example. Lacey looks in the same direction and agrees, because they even have similar hairstyles. But upon closer inspection, suddenly, she covers her face with her hood, either out of fear or shame. At first, the guy doesn't understand the reason for the girl's behavior, but she explained that this was Lord Lamond. Wayne immediately realizes that this is a secret meeting, given the closeness of the two. The girl tries to justify her future husband, saying that they may just be friends, like she and Wayne, but it doesn't sound very convincing. And after the Lord kisses the stranger, Wayne sarcastically adds that they are very close friends indeed. Candlelight is visible in 2 windows of the tavern, and one of those rooms is Lacey's. She has arranged all the paintings she bought on her desk. She placed her staff at the head of the bed, but was unable to sleep. As the girl lay in bed, she was overwhelmed by thoughts of what she had seen. She was not all surprised by this. From the very beginning, she knew that Lamond would never love her, and that sooner or later he would find someone he could truly love. The girl looked at the magical seal on the back of her hand, realizing that she didn't care about it. She just had to fulfill her role, no matter what happened, so that she would not lose anything. Memories of her former team flash before the witch's eyes, and before finally falling asleep, the witch acknowledges the learned fact that she has no other choice. At that moment, Wayne was also awake in his mansion, worrying about Lacey and her stubbornness. The guy stood on the wide balcony, leaning on the railing, while the starry sky stretched out above his head. He already understood that the girl did not know how to be angry, think about her own interests and desires, and even seemed not to understand that it was normal to have feelings. He concludes that it was the contract that taught her this, recalling the mark on the Witch of Dawn's hand. The young man knows that this is cruel, but at the same time, having personally witnessed the power of this mage, he cannot help but agree that leaving such great power unsupervised would be dangerous for the country. The boy grips the railing with his hand and presses his lips together, remembering the image of his girlfriend, and wondering if she is happy with this life. Despite this, he mentally addresses Lacey, saying that he is not going to tell her how to live her life, because he has no right to do so. But if she ever truly wants something with all her heart. He doesn't finish his thought, and once again we see the tavern room, where the lights have been turned off, and the young witch sleeps, half covered by a blanket, while the end of the ribbon from her weapon lies in her hand. The next day, Lacey is again thinking about her engagement. She remembers how, when she was 10 years old, she first met and was betrothed to the Duke. There was a big difference in their ages and social status. His gaze was cold and distant, which she barely remembered. Now, 5 years later, after defeating the Demon King, she saw him cheating on her when she met her squad mate. The girl sits on a stone fence in an empty park near a fountain. Again, nothing is happening. The girl realizes that she is wasting the remaining days before her wedding, having done nothing even today. She also wonders what her other friends are doing now. But Lacey is torn from her aimless musings by the voice of a child calling out to his mother. He says he wants to be a hatter, to which his mother asks if he would rather be a knight. The boy, with a joyful gleam in his eyes, replies that since the hero has defeated the Demon King, there is no need for knights, and that he wants to become a hatter so he can repair his mother's hat. His mother says she will look forward to it. Hearing this makes the girl smile. She remembers that when the threat of demons loomed over them, everyone thought only of survival, but now they can dream of the future again. But this thought makes her wonder what her own future holds. The girl remembers their trip again. Specifically, one of their stops in the forest, where Wayne distracts her from her thoughts by asking about her seal. Such attention frightened the girl. She pulls her hood tighter over her head while Wayne stands opposite her with 2 bowls of soup. He handed one of them to Lacey, inviting her to breakfast the next day, since she had skipped a meal that day. The girl thanks her companion and takes the bowl. The guy assumes that the witch's contract with the king is very powerful and asks what would happen if it were broken. She looks at him in such a way that the swordsman immediately realizes that she herself does not know, and this clearly upsets him. This reaction makes the girl even more nervous, apologize, and question her competence as a magician. Wayne says that's not the point. He asks what Lacey would do if disobeying him meant instant death. She looks at Wayne with sincere incomprehension, because she wouldn't do anything, as she wouldn't be able to disobey. This logic confuses her companion a little. After all, he had something completely different in mind. Lacey never thought about her future, because it would be decided for her. Therefore, returning to the present, she does not even know what to do with herself, and just watches her mother and son walk away. Only in the evening, in her room at the inn, planning to go to bed, does the girl remember that she hasn't eaten anything all day. She thinks about Wayne, who told her to watch what she eats, and wonders if she eats for 2 days tomorrow. Will it count as eating today? Suddenly, she hears a quiet knock on the window and wonders who could be knocking at this hour. Opening the window, the girl is ready to attack the uninvited guest if it is an enemy. But it turns out to be magic, and it's Wayne's magic that envelopes the paper bird. It lands on Lacey's palm, and she guesses that it is most likely a variation of wind magic, and that the spell was invented by the sender himself. Wayne always came up with something interesting. The witch knew this, and his spell that imitated birdsong was a good example. Looking at the night visitor, the girl notices a piece of paper on the inside of its tail. She unfolded the bird, which turned out to be a letter. In it, Wayne asked Lacey to reconsider the king's reward. He also asked her to eat better, drink more water, and take care of herself. At the end, he added that the young witch could always rely on him. This short message made the girl smile, and sharpening her pen, she began to write a reply. She decided to write about the staff again, but she didn't mention anything about food, deciding to eat the next day after all. Folding the letter into the same bird shape that the young man had sent her, Lacey sent it to the mansion. It reached its destination, but the witch miscalculated the force, and the piece of paper stuck into one of the columns. It went in quite deep. This frightened the 2 maids and slightly embarrassed the owner of the estate. He pulled the letter out of the resulting crack and began to read it. In the morning, he sent Lacey a reply in the same way. The girl had just woken up from the sound of a bird tapping on her window. Wayne asked her to come to the castle. He also said that he would talk to her personally about the staff. When they met, the swordsman praised his friend for being a quick learner, but he asked her to take into account the difference in strength, because even a simple piece of paper flying at such a speed could kill. The girl was concerned, asking if he had been hurt. The young man replied that he had not, because he would not be a hero if he had not dodged it. Lacey was happy with this outcome, and the young man asked her not to throw anything like that at anyone else, so as not to cause harm. Then he started talking about the staff, looking at his companion. He asked if the witch was sure she wanted to burn her weapon. She involuntarily grips her staff a little tighter. She lowers her head, and stammering, she replies that she is sure. At that moment, Wayne shouts at another girl, assuming that he is from the ceremony. This lady turns out to be Princess Alicia. Wayne turns to the representative of the crown and greets her politely, to which she replies that he should attend tea parties more often, as many people want to see him. Lacey, watching their conversation, feels out of place in the company of the nobility, even though at that moment Wayne is thinking how much he doesn't want to go to all these social events. Lacey tries to slip away quietly before her friend notices, but the princess suddenly asks Wayne, Who is next to him? Who is next to him? She asked if she was lost. The guy explained that she was one of those who fought with him against the Demon King, the Witch of Dawn. Alicia sighed and apologized for not recognizing her. After all, she looked completely different from her portraits, although the 2 of them had already met. This made Lacey nervous again, but Alicia was completely innocent. After that, the princess said she had things to do and, smiling sweetly, left. When the girl left, Wayne said that this small talk was a waste of time, looking after Alicia as she walked away. Lacey asked him if he would let the princess go alone, but he replied that he was not paid to accompany royalty. Then he turned his attention to Lacey's staff, asking what she had decided about her weapon. The girl gathered her thoughts, preparing to say exactly what she wanted. Then she handed the staff to the swordsman, asking him to destroy it. But she hesitated on one of the words. This completely threw the girl off balance, causing her to lower her head in shame and wish she could sink through the ground. For a moment, silence reigns in the castle courtyard. Then Wayne strokes the girl's head. This slightly confuses the girl. The young man asks if she knows where the training hall is. She answers in the affirmative. The guy says that this staff can only be burned with magic and that he called her to the castle to do it there, but someone might be in the hall right now. Lacey is already tense from these words. But Wayne just smiles and suggests they take a walk to the West Garden, where hardly anyone ever goes, because it is poorly maintained. The girl is a little surprised, but agrees. This part of the garden does indeed look unkempt, although the castle and nearby buildings are visible behind the tall trees. Birds sit in the branches, and ivy has already begun to entwine the statue that stands there. The witch walked a little behind her companion, looking at the garden overgrown with wild plants. After a while, she stops, pursing her lips, and Wayne stops with her. She thanks him and says she is ready. The young man turns around, looks at the girl, and asks if she is sure. She answers affirmatively. But suddenly the guy hears something, and when Lacey asks him again, he covers her mouth with his hand so she won't make a sound. Then he nods toward the bushes where the sounds are coming from. Only then did he let go of the girl. He allowed her to peek behind the branches to see those whose conversation they were hearing. On the other side was Princess Alicia in the arms of Duke Lamont. The witch is confused, and Wayne is indignant, perceiving this as some kind of mockery. At that moment, Lacey realizes that last time it was just a girl from the city. Then now it was much more serious. And all because if someone saw and talked about such a secret meeting, it would damage the reputation of the crown. And she couldn't ignore that. So Lacey stood up, and despite her friend's attempt to stop her, told him to stay in the bushes and stepped forward herself. The girl gripped her staff tighter and took a deep breath. She called out to the couple. They turned around, looking clearly frightened, to see who had found them. But Lamont did not expect to see his fiancée, but he quickly pulled himself together. He forced a smile. As if nothing had happened, he said how unexpected this meeting was for him, asking if the girl had business at the castle. The lord also began to justify himself, saying that he had just met the princess and was only expressing his respect. But Lacey stopped him, saying, albeit a little hesitantly, that she had seen everything. And since she is his fiancée, such behavior is treason and is not acceptable. These words anger Lamont, and he interrupts her, making her shrink back. He clenches his fists and replies that he and the princess love each other, and Lacey has called it such a vile word. Lamont begins to yell at the frightened girl, saying how she, a low-born, insignificant orphan, dares to call herself his fiancée. He continues to insult her. In addition, Lamont admits that he was in despair when the king ordered him to marry her. Then he turns to the royal personage. He kneels before her and kisses the back of her hand. He tells her how much he loves her and that a marriage without love is meaningless. Alicia covers her mouth with her hand. She is amazed and tears of happiness well up in her eyes. Then the man stands up and embraces the princess. And pointing at Lacey with his finger, he insults her again, adding that the thought of touching someone like her makes him sick. He also says he will annul the marriage imposed by the king, calling him brainless. The princess tries to pull him away from insulting her father, but her efforts are very weak. Wayne, still sitting in the bushes, sighs, and yet he peeks out from his hiding place. He addresses the representative of the crown, asking if she has finished her business. Then he turns his attention to the lord, but does not have time to finish his sentence. Like caught lovers, they hide from view. Lacey watches the princess and her fiancé leave. Comparing the speed of their disappearance to that of hares, Wayne replies that such a comparison is humiliating for hares. He says that they have hurt the girl much more, and when Lacey tries to say that Lamont is right about something, Wayne raises his voice, insisting that he is wrong and has sawdust in his head. Calm down, the guy looks at his girlfriend. He asks what she's going to do now. Lacey replies that the king makes the decision, and that her chosen one cannot break off the engagement himself. Wayne asks another question. Does she want this herself? She stammers. She looks at the contract seal. The girl realizes that it doesn't matter what she wants. She has to get married, but remembering what the Lord said to her, how he looked at her, they definitely won't have children, and that's a problem. Lacey's mind flashes back to the day she met her fiancé, when he held out his hand to her, and she trustingly accepted it. At the time, she was even happy that she would have a family, although she couldn't even dream that Lamont would love her. But she never thought he despised her so much. And yet, she couldn't leave it at that. Wayne's call snaps her out of her thoughts. She covers her eyes. She sighed and finally said that she would settle everything with the king. Wayne replied that in that case, they would postpone the matter of the staff, and he would take care of more important business. That is, he will request an audience with the king. With these words, the young man leans slightly toward the girl. After a moment's thought, Lacey agrees, which brings a broad smile to the young man's face. However, this reaction surprises the girl. She tells herself that it's all right, since the matter concerns the aristocracy, and Wayne understands it better than she does, and he'll be able to sort everything out. The time comes to meet the king. The heroes stand kneeling before the monarch's throne in a majestic hall lit by a large chandelier with candles, with tall windows and tapestries on the walls. Next to them, Lamond is also kneeling, and next to the king himself is his daughter, Alicia. The head of state addresses Wayne, saying that since he requested an important meeting, he has gathered everyone and asks what the matter is. And why does his daughter have to be present? The man looks at his daughter, who tries to keep a straight face despite her emotions. He also sees the Witch of Dawn and the heir to the Dejafun family. Lacey looks at her fiancé, seeing how nervous he is and how he is behaving slightly worse than his lover. The king gives Wayne his word. He thanks him, and looking up, he says that the matter at hand also concerns the princess. Silence falls over the castle, and only Wayne's voice can be heard. As he speaks, he mentions something very important. Lacey looks at her companion and sees his confidence. She realizes that the matter has taken a serious turn and tries to figure out what to do. The hall falls silent again. Lacey looks at the swordsman. The lord diligently hides his eyes, and the speaker, as if nothing had happened, suggests to begin. He points to the heir to the Duke of Dejafun and the Witch of Dawn behind him, who are trying to look anywhere but at each other, saying that the two are betrothed by the king himself. But Lamond has another woman. The monarch is outraged by what he hears and turns to the groom to find out if it is true. The man is frightened. With a trembling voice, he tries to deny everything. Wayne looks at him over his shoulder. Then he asks His Majesty not to rush to conclusions. He does not want to accuse the Lord. He understands that this engagement is for the future of the country. But if it does not bring happiness and destroys true love, it is a tragedy. And so he wanted to give Lamond a chance to explain himself. Lamond is surprised by these words, although he almost immediately picks up on this, asking the king for permission to speak. He says he knows about the service of marriage between nobles to the state, but he admits that he has met his destiny, and that is Princess Alicia. The girl is stunned by such a public statement, and her cheeks flush. Wayne continues to glance at him over his shoulder. Lamond adds that he is guilty before both the king and Lady Lacey. Hiding his feelings and entering into this marriage would be a true betrayal. The young man says all this very pompously, theatrically, pressing his hand to his chest. Lacey listens to him. She concludes that Wayne's goal is to convince the king to recognize the union of the lord and the princess by officially betrothing them. That way, there will be no scandal. They are well matched in status, and no one will have to be forced into anything. And considering the fact that His Majesty dotes on his daughter, he will agree. Alicia takes her father's hand, convincing him that she also loves the future duke. Wayne confirms this. He mentions that Lamond had said the same thing to them recently. Using his magic, he reproduces the Lord's declaration of love for the entire hall to hear. Everyone looks up at the spell curling toward the ceiling, and they listen as the young man talks about the meaninglessness of a loveless marriage. Alicia turns to her father and begins to cry. The king concludes that this makes sense. He asks his daughter not to cry. Lamond is inspired, stands up, and begins to ask the head of state for permission to marry the princess. But then, with the movement of Wayne's fingers, the groom's voice is heard again, saying that the mere thought of touching Lacey makes him sick. A dead silence hangs in the hall. The king asks the young man if it is his voice, and without giving him a chance to answer, he asks what he said about the greatest magician in the kingdom. What was heard greatly angered His Majesty. Seeing this, the future duke tried to justify himself, saying that it was a misunderstanding, that the girl was so beautiful that he considered himself unworthy. But then the spell reproduced the young man's last words about the king's stupidity and the annulment of the engagement. This finally enraged the head of state, and he ordered the lord to be arrested. The guards immediately rushed up to him and twisted his arms behind his back. This greatly upset the princess. Together with her beloved, she tried to convince her father to at least talk to him. Lacey was very surprised by this turn of events, not expecting anything like this. Then she looked at Wayne, who was very proud of himself. He addressed His Majesty again, but he interrupted him, saying that he had more important things to do. Wayne simply asked him to make a balanced decision. He mentioned that the Lord had connections with other women. Nevertheless, before deciding the fate of the adulterer, this issue must be investigated. This circumstance further enraged the monarch, and it frightened the princess even more. After that, the king investigated Lamond's relationships with other women. There were quite a few of them, so many that the head of state was very surprised when he saw the list. It is unknown whether his daughter found out about this, but the girl was very upset and did not want to leave her chambers. It must have been very painful to learn that the man whose words had touched her so deeply had deceived her. Duke Dejafun himself came to see Lacey. He apologized profusely to the young witch for his son's behavior, literally falling at her feet. As a result, Lamond was stripped of his inheritance, and his engagement to the Witch of Dawn was broken off. After all these turbulent days, she could finally breathe easy, and now the girl is sitting in a field not far from the castle. The sky above her is clear, without a single cloud, and Wayne is next to her, also admiring the view. The girl admits that she feels more tired than she did even after the battle with the Demon King. The guy smiles, looking at his girlfriend, and says how stupid the former lord was to even try to attack the princess. With these words, he caught Lacey's attention. Wayne then adds that the lord has no taste, no brains, no manners, and is so frivolous that the duke should be glad to be rid of such an heir. In addition, Wayne imagined that if Lacey married the lord, she would take the name Dejafun. I'm sure it sounds awful, and it's good that the engagement has been broken off. Nearby, tied to a tree, the young man's horse grazes. The girl is confused by her friend's words, but suddenly tears begin to roll down her cheeks. She herself does not understand the reason for this, and Wayne certainly doesn't. That's why he's worried. At first, he thinks that Lacey really wanted to get married. Then he dismisses the thought, deciding that it was because of the hurt caused by her ex-fiancé's words, and tries to calm her down. The girl wipes away her tears, wants to say that everything is fine, but her throat feels tight. Then she touches her cane with the toe of her boot. She looks at it, remembering that she hasn't burned it yet. Lacey was about to ask Wayne about it, but suddenly she wonders why she needs it. After all, if she's not getting married, she doesn't need to do it. The girl picks up her weapon. Then she presses it to her chest and starts crying again. She realizes that she doesn't really want to part with this staff. She remembers her childhood in the orphanage. All the children are playing outside, while Lacey sits alone with her dolls in one of the rooms. She was afraid to approach the other children, so she preferred to watch them from the window. And one day, the girl discovered that her hands glowed slightly, and when she touched her cheeks, they were pleasantly warm. At that moment, an elderly female caregiver entered the room. She saw that the orphan was literally glowing because of the mana seeping out. After being examined, she was placed under the care of the state. That's how she ended up in the castle for the first time, where the king ordered her to hone her magic, calling it her destiny. Since then, she immersed herself in her studies, forgetting about food and sleep, so much so that by the time her needs for these things had dulled, the witch had come to be known as the greatest sorceress in the kingdom. As a result, she found a fiancé, and the Witch of Dawn was included in the squad to battle the Demon King. The day they set out on their journey is also etched in her memory. After receiving the king's blessing, the iron gates rose, releasing the 4 companions. It was Lacey's first time leaving the capital, and she felt a slight fear. She stopped and looked down at her feet. Suddenly, Wayne called out to her, urging her on, and gripping her walking stick tighter in her hands. The girl stepped after them, until the wind pulled the hood of her cloak off. Then, for the first time, she realized that anxiety and anticipation are similar. She had experienced many pleasant moments with her squad. Together, they searched for the right paths, treated wounds after battles, and rested in taverns. The dome of the sky above their heads, the changing winds, the seemingly endless road, and the warmth of a friendly shoulder. All these memories were in the staff. Lacey admits to herself that she bought those portraits from the artist because of her loneliness. She wonders what future the eyes of that Witch of Dawn reflect, and then what awaits her. The first answer is already very familiar, as if imposed by the contract itself in the form of a seal on her hand, saying that everything will be decided for her. She is required to marry and bear children, and even if her engagement to the Lord is broken, they will find her another. And this is inevitable. But another thought breaks through these thoughts. Tears are still streaming from the girl's eyes. Lacey looks up at the sky, spread out over the field. A sudden gust of wind ruffles her hair. The girl thinks that she could go around everything she sees if she were free, unbound by anything. If, of course, she is even allowed to desire such a future. Lacey grips her staff tighter again, tears dripping onto her clenched palms. She continues to sob quietly while Wayne is still confused, not knowing how to comfort her. He reaches out to her, but stops. After thinking for a moment, he moves his fingers and magic catches the tears from his friend's cheeks, making them hang in the air. Lacey looks at them, and the guy smiles at her. The girl smiles back at him and agrees. She adds that his magic is very interesting. Wayne looks down, smiling too, and he began to talk about his childhood. As a child, he was not strong in magic and had little mana. And because he was also the second son in the family, no one had high hopes for him. So he often played pranks using spells, for example, scaring his sister and brother with his cat, which, thanks to his camouflage magic, looked like a lion and a dragon to them. Of course, he was scolded for this, but it did not particularly affect the youngster. Lacey, rather jokingly, wonders if her friend had a childhood, to which the swordsman reacts indignantly, asking who she thinks he is. Then he raises his head and says that he never thought he could become a hero. The girl looks at him with a smile, then, closing her eyes, says that she has a wish after all. She no longer wants to burn the staff. This is her new wish. Lacey raises her head, looking at a bird flying overhead. The girl admits that she wants to live alone, like Lacey, to walk her own path freely. The guy watches her through her black hair. He squeezes his fingers slightly. Then he raises his hand, calling the girl. She looks at the young man as he reaches out to her. Wayne said that if she wanted to, he would help her in any way he could. And he cheered the girl up. The Dawn which looks at her companion with flushed cheeks. And then she took the outstretched hand, getting up from the grass. And with a smile, she agreed. A week later, a horse-drawn carriage was traveling through the forest. Several people were riding in the covered wagon, including Lacey. She notices that they have already traveled quite far from the city and wonders how much further they have to go. And yet she still couldn't believe that she was going somewhere alone. The girl looked outside, watching as they drove through the forest. Lacey had originally planned to walk, but Wayne strictly forbade her do so, because doing so just because you don't know how to ride in a wagon is foolish and dangerous. She also shortened her walking stick so that it wouldn't get in the way and hit it. Now she definitely admits that her friend was right, as it is faster and safer, so Lacey was glad she agreed. Afterwards, she wonders, is this a journey or a move? After all, the place she is going to now will be her new home. The girl clutches her pointed hat to her chest. She remembers how she came to the king a week ago, to ask again for the reward she had previously refused. She is still kneeling in the familiar hall, and she is still nervous. The monarch gives her his word. The girl gathers her courage, while behind her, Wayne kneels in support. Lacey reveals that she wants to live alone, not relying on anyone, not bound by obligations, living on her own. And she asks to have the seal of the contract removed. The king tries to object, but Wayne calls out to him and looks at him. The man hesitates. He sighs deeply but agrees. The girl looks at him with wide eyes, and His Majesty stretches out his hand. And Lacey is surrounded by magic, symbols. The seal on her hand begins to glow. The king says that the Witch of Dawn has served the kingdom for many years, and, in gratitude for her victory over the Demon King, he releases her from the seal of the contract. He also gives her a new name, Lacey Estelle. The magic of the contract shatters like glass. She is even given new clothes and now looks better. The sorceress is sure that in her new place, she will finally be free. And then she wonders, what does it mean to be free? This is followed by the question of what she can actually do. After all, nothing was ever required of her except to defeat the enemy and get married, which is essentially nothing. The girl lowers her eyes, her thoughts now turning to her new surname. In ancient times, people connected the stars and drew stories in the sky. And without the stars as a guide, sailors could not find their way. And Lacey wonders if she is worthy of such a surname. At that moment, the carriage stops. The driver calls out to her, saying they have arrived. She gets out, holding her hat, and sees a small village among the hills, the village of Plume. The girl notices that it is a very quiet place. The king gave her 2 farewell gifts. These were a name and a house far from the capital. She walks to the village, looking at the address written on a piece of paper. She donated most of the reward for defeating the Demon King, so the house was a great help to her. On the way, she meets a little squirrel in a tree. She takes a beetle off her cloak and puts it on the grass. And she thinks. She still doesn't know what to do and decides to go see the house. On the way, she sees a boy digging in the ground. Lacey decides it's a field, but then notices that it's too overgrown. But more importantly, she thinks that this child, although younger than her, is working very hard. And then the thought occurs to her that she also needs to try hard, for example, to improve her living conditions. It is essential to eat. Only the girl doesn't like shopping. It occurs to her that she could gather edible herbs. It's mushroom and acorn season right now. But she dismisses this idea because of the rumbling in her stomach, as she needs something substantial. Throughout her deliberations, a boy who had noticed her tried to call out to Lacey. Only on the third try did the girl finally hear him and get scared. She asked if he was calling her. The young man replied that there was no one else around, so he was talking to her. The girl came closer. It turned out that the boy needed to remove a tree. He wanted to make a field, but this obstacle was delaying his work. He looked away, saying that it would take him another year to get it done. So he thought the girl could use magic to remove the tree. The young man was enthusiastic about this, But Lacey was hesitant. The sorceress knows that magic is convenient, but it is not omnipotent, and she doesn't know any spells for moving trees. She considers simply blowing up the necessary area, but quickly dismisses the idea, because even with protection, it would be dangerous and fraught with consequences even for the youngest farmer. It could also ruin the land. Lacey is already thinking of giving up, but only after starting to say something. She notices the birds chirping on the branches. Lane remembers the spells Wayne used to send her notes in the form of birds and to wipe away her tears. She asks the boy to step aside. She enlarges her hidden staff. She closes her eyes. A symbol appears in a circle under her feet, and magic begins to swirl around her, billowing her clothes and hair. The mage connects the sensation of space, the earth, the force of gravity, and the wind, realizing that she can do it. She opens her eyes, and the young man sees the tree that was blocking his way take flight with its roots into the air. He is amazed by what he sees, and Lacey asks him where to move the former obstacle. The magic moves the tree aside, and the girl also removes the stones that are in the way and a mole that has been accidentally disturbed. When the girl decides that this is enough, the boy has bare ground in the right place, ready to be broken up on this field. He is delighted with what he sees and with the result. The girl is already starting to leave, quietly saying so, but the boy grabs her by the elbow. He forces her to stop and turn around. Stumbling, he thanks the witch, and holding her hand, he adds that she is amazing. Then he blushes slightly and apologizes, which surprises Lacey a little. The boy explained that he had given up hope because the clearing wasn't progressing, so he said something without thinking. They both looked at the cleared ground. The boy lowers his head slightly and says that Lacey did it after all. It was incredible. She really helped him out, and he thanks her. The girl blushes at such words, and tears well up in her eyes. Ashamed, she covers her face with the brim of her hat and turns away. She mumbles that there is nothing to thank him for. The young farmer asks her to repeat what she said. He is a little taken aback by her reaction. Lacey wipes away her tears, thinking that she hasn't cried in a long time, but lately tears come to her eyes on their own, which confuses her. But she also wonders why her tears are so warm. The boy waves goodbye to her, and the girl leaves. She lowers her eyes, clutching her staff. She thought she was useless and began to believe that freedom was meaningless for someone like her. Lacey looks up at the sky. The first stars were already appearing, one of which shone particularly brightly. A question arose in the girl's mind. What if that wasn't true, and she could be useful? At this time, at the Wayne estate, a servant holds a list in his hands and asks the young swordsman if he wants everything on it to be prepared. The young man nods, and the servant bows and says that everything will be done. Wayne also specifies that everything must be ready for his next vacation. The servant asks him again, surprised, looking up at him. He thought these things were for the expedition. The young man looks down at the map, showing the village of Plume. He mentions a housewarming gift for a friend. At that moment, Lacey arrives at her new home and goes inside. A week after Lacey moved to the village, Wayne visited her with gifts. At the same time, he suggested opening a store. This confused the girl, and she began to ask, for whom? During this conversation, the guy braided the girl's pigtails, replying that of course it was for her. Lacey objected, saying she couldn't do it. At that moment, Wayne finished braiding her last pigtail. He reasoned aloud that he should have taken a ribbon, so he could have done a different hairstyle. The girl was still confused by the proposal, asking why he thought she needed it. The guy replied that there are different kinds of shops, and he wasn't suggesting she open a popular bakery with huge queues. She imagined all the baked goods in vivid detail. After admitting that she didn't know how to bake, Wayne had to distract her from this thought, saying that she didn't have to bake bread. He said that maybe it all happened by accident, but she helped that boy clear the field. She enjoyed helping someone, she wanted help again, and that was very good. But you can't stop there. Wayne turns his back to her, and Lacey raises her eyebrows slightly. The guy adds that you need money to live. The girl repeats the last word, looking at her friend with wide eyes. He explains that she has been living under the care of the state all this time, which is why she never thought about it. But her previous life also required money. Rent, servants' wages, food, household items, clothing, magical materials. All of these were expenses. Now Lacey doesn't have to pay for a house, and she doesn't need much on her own. But even so, she won't get anything for free. He even suggested that the money she had received earlier was already running out. All this made the girl even more nervous because she didn't even know how to earn money. For Wayne, this was confirmation that the store was really needed. That way, the sorceress would help people and earn an income. Finally, the girl understood, though she blushed slightly. However, Wayne adds that if she was going to live as a hermit and eat grass, that would be a different matter, asking if that was what she wanted. Lacey denies this, although the guy's words hit the nail on the head, as she had indeed considered such a lifestyle. The witch exhales, looking at Wayne, lost in thought about him. She considered her companion remarkable because he was a nobleman and probably never needed money, but he understood the lives of ordinary people better than she did. The guy even took care of everyone on the trip. Although, in reality, Wayne was sure that there was not a single normal person in their group, and if he didn't take everything upon himself, everything would go wrong. That's why he did the cooking while the other three waited for him. But Lacey still admired his many skills, believing that it was not for nothing that the Holy Sword had chosen him, even if the artifact had no idea about it. Then she catches herself. She shook her head, dismissing unnecessary thoughts, while her guest silently watched her friend's inner turmoil. She realized that she too now had to learn to be independent, and all these thoughts weighed heavily on her mind. Wayne looked at the girl for a moment, folding his arms. Then he smiled. He walked over to the table. He encouraged the girl with words, telling her to start with what she could and not to rush. Lacey wanted to object, moving her chair closer to the table where the guy had already sat down. But he looked out the window. The wind was tearing the leaves off one of the trees, carrying them away. Wayne says that there was a cold wind in the morning. Winter is coming soon. Then he looked at Lacey, propping his head up with his hand, and added that she needed to get used to her new life first and also gather her strength so she wouldn't catch a cold. The girl tried to say something to him, but the guy lowered his head. Then he looked at her from under his eyebrows, asking if she was eating properly. This made Lacey feel anxious, as usual. But then she smiled, saying that of course she was eating well. Then the swordsman asked her when she last ate. Lacey got up from her chair and said that she had eaten in the morning, and the morning before that, and the evening before that, and the day before that. Wayne was confused for a second, but then he showed his admiration. He couldn't believe that this was coming from someone who had pushed herself to exhaustion and then eaten medicinal herbs to recover. He also decided to ask what exactly she ate at each meal, and the answer to everything was carrots. The guy was ready to accept this fact, if she prepared it in different ways, but then he saw that Lacey was eating the vegetable raw, so he fell silent. In the end, he cooked carrots with herbs for her, which the girl really liked, since it was both tasty and now soft. Wayne admitted that the root vegetable could be eaten raw, but boiled carrots were easier to chew. And in response to the praise, he said that he felt strange when he was praised for simply boiling carrots. Then he decided to ask, where did the girl get so many carrots? Looking at one of the boxes, she said they had been given to her, and when asked by whom, she told him about the boy she had helped. Although the sorceress refused, he still brought her a whole bunch. Wayne praised her for accepting the gift, and when Lacey objected, still convinced that her actions were insignificant, he replied that it might be so for her. But for the young farmer, it was enough to express his gratitude, and she needed to learn to accept that. In addition, looking at the spider that had come down from the ceiling, Wayne reminded her that during their journey, the villagers had also treated them to food. Lacey remembers that this was true. Ordinary people often held feasts in honor of their saviors. It was gratitude, but because she disliked large crowds, the girl preferred to refuse and train somewhere off to the side. And looking at Wayne, who was thinking about cleaning the kitchen at that moment, she realized how much she was missing. Not only other people's feelings. She didn't even understand her own. The girl ate another spoonful of carrots, and she exhaled with the understanding that she had a lot to do. She got up from the table, admitting to herself that her friend was right and that she would start with what she could. And she would start by helping Wayne clean up, who had already set to work with the help of magic. And so night fell. And then, the next morning, at breakfast, Lacey learned that the guy was already getting ready to leave. She said he could stay longer. Sipping tea from his cup, Wayne replied that he would like that too. But he was about to leave for a mission. The sorceress asked him again, and he put his cup on the saucer. The young man explained that a dangerous monster had appeared in the north, and there was a possibility that it could be a servant of demons. The girl was a little confused because they had destroyed all the demons, to which Wayne replied that it was only demons, but not all of their minions. Now that the demons are gone, their servants will weaken, but they will still have to deal with them as they appear, so the expeditions will continue. Lacey listens to her companion in silence. Then she asks him to take care of himself. Outside, a cool wind is still blowing, tearing leaves from the trees, and the sorceress came out to see her guest off, as it was already time for him to leave. He advised her not to eat only carrots, as he had left many other things in the pantry, and the girl replied that she would try. Meanwhile, the boy's horse was chewing on one of the root vegetables. Wayne turned around to look at the girl's house. He noticed that such a large house was difficult to clean. He tidied up the kitchen, but everything else remained untouched. The young man also pointed out that the air in the house was very stuffy and asked if she aired out the room she didn't use. Lacey said that wasn't what they were talking about right now. She handed the young man a jar of medicinal herbs she had found in the pantry and offered it to him. Wayne smiled and declined, asking her to keep it, as he had his own medicine in the expedition wagon. He also warned her to be careful, because when you live alone, you never know what might happen. The witch smiled at this, agreeing, mentally comparing him to her mother again. Finally, Wayne compliments her new hat and clothes, looking gently at his friend. She touched the brim of her hat, smiled, and blushed slightly, and thanked him. Wayne left, waving to the girl, and she waved back, clutching the jar of herbs to her chest. Afterwards, she looked at her hand, thinking that even after fulfilling his role as a hero, the guy continued to fight. So she couldn't run away and say she couldn't do it. Lacey thought for a moment. Then she turned around and went into her house. At first she thought about the store, then switched to cleaning. She assesses the state of the house. The sorceress concludes that she could have been given a more modest house. But now she has to decide where to start cleaning. A moment from Lacey's squad's journey. A pillar of magic rises above the treetops, scaring away the birds in the area. Saint Dana looks toward the source of the noise, noticing that the witch is still busy, while Brooks asks Wayne if the magic needs a rest. He sighs. He gets up, saying he will call the sorceress. Dana smiles, saying how caring the guy is and that she will save a portion for the girl. Wayne finds Lacey in the forest, standing with her back to him. The young man thinks that training is good, of course, but getting so carried away that you forget to eat is not normal. And he also calls his companion a real magic fanatic. He calls out to her, but when Lacey turns around, she looks tired and exhausted. This confuses Wayne. The girl asks what happened. She receives the answer that nothing happened and that she just forgot about food. As they return to Dana and Brooks, Wayne wonders if Lacey really loves magic. She clearly didn't look happy or enthusiastic. He also wonders if the Witch of Dawn is considered the best magician in the kingdom, but talent alone is clearly not enough to achieve that. All that reckless training at such a young age leaves one guessing. How much has she been through? And what for, anyway? Wayne hears a cough behind him, which makes him worry about his companion. Lacey is currently sitting at the table, thinking. She is experiencing a strange feeling. In theory, she should already be married and living in the duchy of Deja Fun. The girl lowers her eyes. Just a few weeks ago, her life did not belong to her because of the seal. But now, thanks to Wayne's help, the engagement was broken off, and he also helped her decide to terminate her contract with the king. The witch gained her freedom. She moved and began to vaguely understand what she wanted. She also remembered helping the village boy with his field and his gratitude for it. But now she understood that freedom was not easy, mostly from Wayne's stories. She could not even imagine that her life could change so much. Lacey closed her eyes. After all the recent commotion, the silence brought a new wave of realization. She really was going to live here alone, in this very house. Even if it was dirty at the moment, there was dust, cobwebs, and mice everywhere. A spider running across the table finally snaps her out of her thoughts, causing her to move her hand slightly. At the moment, the only clean place in the house is the kitchen, which Wayne has cleaned up, so the sorceress tells herself that there is still a lot to do and no time to daydream. And to start with, cleaning. Lacey ties her hair back, takes off her cape and hat, leaving herself in her dress, and picks up a broom. But then she looks around. She catches herself thinking that, even though she understands the necessity of it, there are so many places to clean that she doesn't know where to start. Then she looks at the broom she found in the utility room, and she comes to the conclusion that using magic for cleaning is not forbidden. Is it? Standing on a ladder, she takes out her miniaturized staff and casts a spell that causes a magic circle to appear at the end of the staff, and magic spreads throughout the house. With this, Lacey airs out the room, sweeps away the dust, beats the rugs in the yard, slightly scaring the birds, and collects the dust in one place with a broom. In the same way, she prepares water in a bucket. After all this, she thinks about magic. All other possessors of this use it as a weapon, studying a limited number of formulas in order to apply it as quickly, powerfully, and accurately as possible against their enemies. Perfecting it is considered the pride and purpose of a mage's existence. She used to think that way too, but after helping the farm boy, her opinion changed. As Lacey continued cleaning, magic swirled around her in a powerful stream. She washed the floor and walls, creating many soap bubbles. She washed the dishes, wrapping them in an air cushion. While doing all this, the witch realized something. Depending on the strength and combination, magic could do anything. It was even fun for the girl as she imagined the broom, carpet, and bucket dancing with the help of spells. After finishing the first floor, the sorceress decided to check the second floor. There she found one door that would not open. But Lacey didn't pay any attention to it, simply gathering dust at the entrance. She decided to blow it out onto the street through the main doors. A powerful gust of air burst through the open doors and knocked the approaching guest off his feet. The scream frightened the witch herself. causing her to run out onto the porch. There, sitting on the ground, was her old acquaintance, the farmer's boy, surrounded by scattered potatoes. At first, the young man did not understand what had knocked him down, assuming it was the wind. Lacey led him into the house, sat him down at the table, gave him a handkerchief to wipe off the dirt, and began to apologize. The boy just waved her off. He just asked if it was magic too. The sorceress said yes. Then she pointed to the potatoes the boy had brought, which had already been put back in a basket. He turned around and said that this was the second part of his gratitude for the field. The girl stammered her thanks, thinking to herself that this was now a new ingredient and asking Wayne if it could be cooked. She herself gave a positive answer. She took one root vegetable in her hands, noticing the pleasant smell of earth, and remembering that when her new acquaintance brought carrots last time, she didn't even have time to thank him. But she tried to remember his name, Alan. Lacey offered him tea, which he accepted, and now the girl looks at the tea set, holding a jar of tea and a spoon in her hands. She can't decide how many leaves to put in, what temperature the water should be. At that moment, the boy looks around, and when Lacey finishes brewing the tea, she notices that the house feels fresher. The girl assumes that this is most likely because she has just cleaned up. Alan says that this is also true, but he meant that the atmosphere had changed. Before, the house had felt oppressive, and she didn't want to be there. Lacey is waiting for the tea to brew. She remembers that she hasn't introduced herself to her new acquaintance. When she tells him her name, the boy is surprised and says that he is also called the Witch of Dawn from the hero squad and asks if she is the one. The girl begins to get nervous, try to understand how he figured it out so easily. Is it because of her magic or her name? Seeing no point in hiding, the sorceress gathers her courage. But as soon as she starts to speak, Alan says he was joking. After all, the Witch of Dawn is an adult with red hair. The boy even suggests that Lacey is her fan. He admits that if he has a little sister, he would like to name her after this great magician. And while he talks about the beauty and power of the hero's squad member, Lacey becomes even more convinced that she must not be revealed, becoming very frightened. The tea is brewed, and the witch pours it into cups, placing one in front of her guest. He looks inside, sees his reflection in the drink, and thanks the hostess. The girl raised the cup and took a sip. Then she noticed that the taste was not at all the same as Wayne's, even though it was the same tea. She even thought that she should have asked Wayne to teach her how to brew it. At that moment, Alan also took a sip of tea, and Lacey immediately admitted that the drink wasn't very good. But the young farmer looked up at her and said that it was delicious. This surprised the girl. She said that when her friend brewed tea, it tasted completely different, to which the boy replied that he liked it just the way it was. Lacey agrees and thanks him, but she promises that next time she will brew it better, because this drink is even tastier. The farmer replies that he will look forward to it. He also agrees that the tea is probably expensive and that this is the first time he has ever tasted such an aroma. Lacey hadn't even thought about it, but it was Chelanite County's signature tea. In addition, Alan noticed that her tea set was expensive, from which he concluded that Lacey was wealthy, surprising her with this statement. To back up his words, he pointed to her home, because a commoner would not live in such a mansion. The enchantress began to deny it. She explained that the tea had been given to her as a gift and that she had inherited the house by chance. The boy was surprised by such gifts, noting that Lacey must have very generous acquaintances. At the very least, the king could be called generous. The girl also said that the cups were already in the house. Hearing this, the boy looked at the cup, said that if they belonged to the Wellbear family, then their quality was not surprising. The girl was surprised and asked him again who was he talking about. Alan even jumped up from his chair, surprised that the new mistress didn't even know whose house she was living in. Lacey decided to ask who they were, and the boy immediately frowned. He said it would be better if she didn't know, but it was too late now. The girl smiled as she listened to her guest. The young farmer sighed, and he began to tell her about the disappearance of the former owners, the Wellbear couple, and how there had been many owners of the house since then, but they didn't stay long. Lacey asked if they had run away. The boy answered in the affirmative, looking even more gloomy. The kitchen also darkened. It started to rain outside. According to the locals, the ghosts of the old residents appear in the house. The rain intensified slightly. The girl was slightly confused by these new details about the history of her new home and asked the storyteller again about the ghosts of the former owners of the house. He confirmed this, explaining that they were a married couple of merchants. Initially, they had a regular store selling various small items, but their lives were greatly changed by the feather of a magical beast. The boy began to remember how he first saw it. His mother showed it to him, saying it was a cockatrice feather. Alan was much younger then and did not know about such a beast. So his mother told him about this magical bird with a snake instead of tail. And Mr. Wellbear recently started trading in the feathers of this bird. Brooches and hair ornaments made with these feathers are highly prized by the knowledgeable and wealthy, so she began to help with the work. She was working on hair ornaments, which the boy also learned about by asking his mother, clinging to her hand. Cockatrices usually look like white chickens, but these feathers shone like burning gold. Because of their value, they were especially prized and brought great prosperity to the village, and the merchants were able to build themselves this huge house where the boys are now talking. Many benefited from this, and it was all thanks to the Welbear family. In the capital, Plume even began to be called the village of feathered decorations. The residents even decided to rename the settlement and hung the new name on the gate, but the joy did not last long. Soon, the supply of golden feathers stopped. After all, Mr. Welbear was in charge of the supply. After the couple fled, production stalled, and only the name remained from the past. And as Lacey added, the house. Alan continues, saying that the mansion is nice. There were many who wanted to get it, and there were quite a few thieves, but they all ran away. And then rumors began to spread in the village that the merchants did not run away, but died in the house, and now the mansion is cursed. With these words, the young man created a creepy atmosphere, but Lacey remained unperturbed, listening with curiosity and sipping her tea. Even when her guest told her about the voices that, according to the same rumors, could be heard deep inside the house. Alan noticed that the atmosphere had changed since Lacey moved here, but he asked if she had heard any strange noises. She replied that she had not. A real thunderstorm began outside, and just as the boy began to say that rumors were just rumors and that the villagers might have simply made them up, lightning flashed outside the window, illuminating the room. The boy screamed, jumping up from his chair again. He pointed behind Lacey, but when she turned around, there was only a wall. The young man clutched his chest, still in terror, claiming that he had seen a black man there, that people's speculations were true, and that they needed to run. The girl remained silent. Then she turned to the guest, who was still shaken by the scare, asking if it was his own shadow. It gradually dawned on him that it was his own shadow, cast on him from behind by the lightning. Alan soon ran home, promising to come back, and added that Lacey should come to the village if anything happened. He also remembered that he had forgotten to bring her a bow. The sorceress waved him goodbye. She closed the door. She turned around. She approached the stairs, deciding that if there was anything in the house, it was on the second floor and needed to be checked. She enlarged her staff. The girl remembered Wayne's words about the stagnant air and had decided that they were talking about the ghosts of the couple. Most likely it was some kind of undead or spirits. Such creatures simply linger nearby and exert a bad influence, appearing very scary. And if a curse is placed on a witch, she will not be able to remove it. But if the inhabitants of the house are defeated before that, there will be no problems and they don't seem so scary. Lacey moves through the second floor, lighting the way with magic. She remembers that while cleaning, she found a locked door. She enters one of the rooms. She began to search, looking around the abandoned room with boxes, scrolls, and candles. Her attention is drawn to a bookshelf, from behind which she hears an indistinct sound, like a voice. The girl approaches the shelf, touches it with her hand, realizing that the door is hidden by a magical device, which means that there is definitely something behind it. She casts a spell. Lacey manages to push apart the shelves, behind which there really is a door. With another spell, she unlocks the door and goes inside. Dust or smoke flew at her, forcing Lacey to cover her mouth and nose with her hand. But when everything settled down, she could see a bird sitting on the floor. It was chained by its paw. It was the one making those strange noises. The witch looks more closely. She saw brown feathers with flecks of gold on her find. The sorceress assumed that this was the golden cockatrice Alan had told her about, except that there was no snake tail in sight. The girl looked at the magic door, which provided double protection. Then she looks back at the bird in chains. It had no food or water, and unsurprisingly, it was angry. It turns out that it had been about 3 or 4 years since the Welbear couple disappeared, and all this time the magical beast had been kept chained here. Such creatures are usually more resilient than ordinary ones, but she couldn't believe that cockatrices could be so tenacious. Although, if it was a mutated specimen, its life energy might be higher. While she was thinking, the bird, which had been glaring at her all this time, ruffled its feathers, lost the last of its strength, and slumped down. Lacey knelt down on one knee in front of it, apologizing. She said she would only remove the chain and that the feathered creature needed to remain calm. She reached out her hand to the supposed cockatrice, which looked very sad. But suddenly it began to peck at the witch, which was very painful. The girl said louder that she only wanted to remove the chain, deciding to do it with magic. But when she tried to cast the spell, she was pushed away. It seemed that the chain was enchanted with a spell that suppressed magic. So she had to break the carrier, which she did using her staff. The chain shattered, freeing the magical bird. Lacey rejoiced, but not for long, because her recent prisoner started pecking at her again. The witch asks it to stop. Then she threatens that if the cockatrice doesn't stop, she will turn it into roast chicken. Of course, she doesn't get to finish her sentence, as the bird loses consciousness and falls to the floor, feet up. Because of this, the girl already decided that the magical beast was dead. But upon closer inspection, it turned out that it was breathing and trembling. The bird also did not respond to touch. Upon examination, Lacey discovered traces of trimming on the flight feathers. She remembered Wayne talking about the musty air, and Alan about the changed atmosphere. Numerous seals and barriers, all for the sake of keeping the cockatrice. Inadvertently, she even drew a parallel with herself. The bird was kept locked up. Its feathers were plucked while it was still alive, and then it was thrown into a dark room. All the malice and hatred of the unfortunate creature eventually permeated the entire house. Lacey touched the bird's neck with her fingers. It was still raining heavily outside. The girl picked up the magical beast and held it close to her, feeling that its breathing was very weak. She understood that if this continued, the cockatrice would die. She tried to figure out what to do about it. Lacey recalls a trip with a group of heroes, preparing food at one of the stops. Brooks caught 2 ducks, the others bought fresh herbs in town, and they used various seasonings and laid out all the ingredients on a piece of cloth. They planned to roast the whole bird for dinner. At that time, Lacey was trying her hand at cooking and didn't know much. Wayne was in charge of everything, but she remembered that dinner as being exceptionally delicious. Now she stands in her kitchen, laying out what appears to be a dead cockatrice, medicinal herbs, and oil on the table. Without knowing better, one might think that the witch had decided to cook a magical beast. That wasn't true, so the girl decided she had laid it out for no reason. Wrapping it in a cloth, she moved the bird to a chair. Then she picked up the herbs Wayne had given her. She never thought she would use them so soon, even assuming that her friend had foreseen something like this. Of course, he had no idea about such a case. Lacey began to prepare the potion. She chopped the herbs. At one point, she glanced at the bird. It was making quiet, painful sounds, and in the light, its remaining golden feathers were much more visible. The girl imagined what this cockatrice must have looked like and began to wonder why it looked so pitiful now. She guessed that when the magical bird's golden feathers stopped growing, it was abandoned, and the new brown ones were protective mimicry. Also, most likely, the snaketail was cut off because it got in the way. This could also have been the reason for its emaciation. Lacey added a little oil to the herbs, thinking it would be good to ask someone about it. But judging by Alan's story, no one in the village knew the truth. However, when the bird recovers, everything will become clear. Soon, the potion was ready. It was ordinary, moderately healing wounds and relieving fatigue. But when she tried to apply it, the magical creature became agitated again. It began pecking at Lacey while she tried to explain that it was just a normal potion. The girl and the bird froze, facing each other, and she realized she couldn't approach it. She took the spoon with the potion and threw it at her opponent. The spot where it landed lit up, but the treatment had no effect. The bird, not understanding what had just happened, and attacked the girl again. When the calm returned, Lacey was able to analyze the result. The potion's power was insufficient. Less strength had been restored than expected, although such medicines should work on such creatures. The cockatrice turned away from her indignantly and approached the chair. After examining the bird a little more closely, Lacey decided that was enough for today and realized that it was not the flight feathers that had been cut off, but the main magical feathers. These are special feathers found on winged magical beasts such as griffins, harpies, cockatrices, and others. They accumulate and circulate magic, acting as a second heart. Having lost this, the creature can hardly use magic, and its endurance and lifespan suffer. The ordinary healing potion she holds in her hands is incapable of restoring such feathers. Without it, the beast is like a leaky bucket because magic does not stay in it and constantly flows out. And in order to restore the magical feathers, it is necessary to instantly pour a large amount of magic into the body, more than it has time to leak out, filling it up. Lacey even thought that if Saint Dana were here, her miracle could heal everything. But since she is not here, the girl would have to rely on herself. She cleared a small area behind her house with magic. She left only the worms and the soil, which attracted the attention of a magical bird. Alan's help with clearing the field was useful to Lacey, as the boy told her a little about growing plants, including the benefits of earthworms. The girl took the root of the medicinal herb that Wayne had left behind. She planted it in the ground while the cockatrice beat her with its paw, once again dissatisfied with something. Medicinal herbs absorb magic from the soil, sending underground shoots and growing. So Lacey decided to saturate the soil with her magic so that the plants could absorb it more effectively and grow with a greater supply of it. Of course, this was only in theory. The herbs gradually grew, and Lacey watched them closely, along with a harmful bird, whose attack she had already grown accustomed to. The leaves had already fallen from the trees, and Lacey continued her experiments with herbs, growing them in different ways. Sometimes she used magic in the soil, sometimes she used the same water, sometimes she used everything at once, and in the end, she grew the shoots using magical hydroponics. Lacey still continues to go to her garden with the bird, and the first snow was already beginning to fall from the sky. Once again, she uses magic on the herbs, even though it's quite cold outside. Because of this, the magical beast, Frozen, begins to sneeze. So the girl returns to the house and lights the fireplace. The creature settles closer to the source of heat, covered with a cloth. Lacey cooked some boiled potatoes for herself, which is her meal of the day. Tasting it, she notices that today it turned out perfectly and surprisingly delicious. Then she looks at the other inhabitant of the house. She places 2 boiled root vegetables on a plate in front of it, offering them to eat. The bird is cautious at first. It begins to peck at the offered treat very actively. This makes the girl smile. She sits down on a chair next to it, sharing her meal with her charge. Winter passed, and a rainy spring arrived. And finally, the new potion, enhanced with magic, was ready. It was an extreme remedy with an unimaginable amount of magic, so it could really help restore magical feathers. Lacey immediately decided to try it out, but she did not find her friend by the fireplace. Not in the room at all. She went upstairs, guessing where she might find him. Sure enough, the bird was sitting in the room that had recently been its prison. Lacey sat down next to it, while the magical beast, wrapped in its makeshift blanket, cooed something in response. It raised its head, looking somewhere, and the girl followed its gaze. There was a small round window in the ceiling through which she could see the rain falling incessantly. The bird laid its head back down on the floor, closing its eyes. And finally, Lacey understood. It wasn't her imagination. She noticed that with each rain, the creature was getting worse, like a tiny flame that flickered, barely holding on, about to go out. Lacey strokes the bird's head with her finger, to which it cooed something quietly again. Lacey apologized for disturbing it, and she smears her potion on the creature's wing with a brush. The spot with the medicine glows, and the golden feathers that had been cut off earlier really do start to grow back quickly. The girl is delighted with the result, but suddenly the bird falls completely to one side. Joy is replaced by confusion. Why did the magical feathers grow back, but the magic inside the body did not return? Lacey presses her lips together. She realizes that if this continues, her feathered companion will die. The rain drums harder on the roof, which Lacey notices. And then a thought occurs to her. What if it is the rain that is preventing the restoration? She takes a staff out of the small bag at her waist and enlarges it to its former size. Lacey decides that if the weather is really the problem, she will stop it. The bird looks up at the girl. She begins to recite a spell. At that moment, the girl remembers her conversation with Wayne after breaking her contract with the king. The guy says that she's been given a very good name and that it suits her. But Lacey wonders if it's too grand for her. After all, it means star. It might suit the Witch of Dawn from the portraits, as she is beautiful and majestic. Wayne reminds her that the girl loves this painting. She denies it, explaining that anyone would think so. Wayne smiles. He replies that in time, she will understand the meaning of the name. Lacey doesn't know if that realization will come. At that moment, the boxes in the room shake. A magic circle appears above the roof of the house. Lacey opens her eyes and lowers the tip of her staff to the floor, so that it is in the center of another circle, but smaller. A flash of light shines, visible even from outside, far from the house. And a pillar of light strikes the sky. It crashes into the clouds, scattering them in an instant. The rain stopped, and through the hole in the ceiling, Lacey could see a scattering of stars. The room is still filled with a shining magical mist, and the magical creature reaches for it, opening its beak slightly. The girl turns around to see if the bird is feeling better, and becomes a witness to reincarnation. It grows larger and is illuminated by light, and soon a phoenix appears before the girl. Lacey recognized this magical creature by its scarlet and gold feathers, fiery tail, crown, and voice. And now she understood why her ward couldn't stand rain and had such great vitality. Apparently, it had absorbed the magic that filled the room after the spell, making it its own. It was the first time a girl had seen a phoenix, so she didn't know what it was capable of. But its gaze was still evil. The bird suddenly began to fall over again, frightening the girl. But then it let out a cry and flew out through the hole in the ceiling in a fiery whirlwind. Lacey watched the creature fly away, and then she heard her own stomach growl. She smiled. She hadn't used such powerful magic in a long time, which is why she now needed to eat. And this time, she couldn't just eat potatoes. In the past, she could go without eating for several days and not feel hungry. A strange sound distracted her from her thoughts of food. Turning around, Lacey discovers a fairly large egg on the floor. That was where the sounds were coming from. Then began to wobble. Crack! And before Lacey could do anything, the shell finally broke, revealing a flash of fire. Instead, a fluffy phoenix chick appeared, making the characteristic sound of these birds. Lacey was extremely confused and stunned. The little phoenix flew up to her, also chirping. The only thing the girl could manage to say was, "What is going on?" In the morning, the girl discovered quite large puddles on the street. She concluded that the rain had been heavier than she thought. But last night she had been too preoccupied to notice. After all, after everything that had happened, she had witnessed the birth of a phoenix. After it hatched, the witch picked it up and examined it, after shouting to the chick's parent that it had forgotten it. But by that time, the adult had already flown away. This led Lacey to believe that the creature wanted her to raise this baby. At that moment, the chick was still cooing at her. Lacey had no idea how to care for this magical creature or what to feed it, although its parent ate everything from grains to potato peelings. The chick ran around the house for the rest of the evening and now fell asleep, using the girl's hat as a nest. So she still hadn't decided what to feed it. The girl went to the village shop. She intended to buy everything that might be suitable, but the village was in turmoil. Lacey heard talk of landslides, washed-out roads that were impassable, concerns about recovery, and loud thunder. She pursed her lips, realizing that she had come at the wrong time. This made her think about whether she should go to the store at all. After all, it might not be open, or she might get in the way, or she might already have the thing she needed. So Lacey decides to go home and try to use the ingredients she has at home. Besides, the chick was probably already awake. At that moment, she caught the attention of a man, and he shouts at her. He says that her face is unfamiliar and asks where she is from. The girl does not have time to answer. As the stranger approaches and anxiously begins to question her, he asks if she is from the city. Where are her parents? And the carriage? Then the man remembers that it is impossible to get to the village so early in the morning. Finally, Lacey is able to answer that she lives here in a house on the hill. Her interlocutor does not have time to finish his new question. What is his name? It turns out to be Alan, who is the man's father. The boy says he hasn't found anything and there are no fresh ones anywhere. His father is depressed by this situation. Alan, seeing the witch, asks what she is doing with his dad nearby. Lacey doesn't have time to answer. The boy and his father head toward their house, calling Lacey to come with them. The girl is surprised, but follows them anyway. In the house, she sees a woman in bed who is clearly unwell. Her father, son, and an old woman are standing around her. The woman, named Trisha, is Alan's mother. Only now does Lacey notice that she is pregnant and holding her stomach. The grandmother asks if Cargo, the father of the young farmer she already knows, has found any medicinal herbs. But the answer is no. Everyone in the village only has dried herbs. The adult woman says that this is bad, as the mother has started bleeding again and may not live to give birth. She adds that she will prepare more potions. At this moment, Alan is sitting on his mother's bed. Lacey approaches him to find out what is going on. The boy apologizes. He explains that, as he mentioned earlier, he is expecting a brother or sister, and it should happen today. During childbirth, a lot of dried herbs are needed for brewing and pain relief. But his mother is bleeding heavily, so without a recovery potion or high-quality herbs, it could be dangerous. So he and his father have been looking for herbs all day, but haven't found any. Lacey excitedly replies that she has what they need. She runs out of the house, promising to bring it, ignoring her friend's call. At that moment, the Phoenix chick was still sleeping in the witch's hat, so was very frightened when the mistress burst into the house. With an armful of herbs, all flushed and out of breath, she grabs her headdress, causing the chick to roll out of its makeshift nest. Noticing this, she knelt down in front of it, begging for forgiveness. She said she was just looking for a place to put the herbs. She picks up the Phoenix, but it is clearly not offended, only silently looking at Lacey. The girl is touched by the sight of this fluffy ball. Unable to leave it there, she first puts the herbs in her hat and then places the baby on top. She runs out of the house, holding her headdress close to her chest. On the way, she recalls the time when she thought she had no future, when life and death were almost indistinguishable from each other. But now she knows how boundless the sky is, how dazzling the light is. The warmth of tears, the joy of a hand that squeezes back in response, and the feeling when the beating of someone else's heart becomes unbearably dear. Lacey was able to experience all this in the relatively short time since her contract was terminated. And now Lacey could not allow two lives to disappear before her eyes at once, especially since one of them would not have time to experience a single thing in this world. That couldn't be allowed to happen. The girl throws open the door. She runs into the village house, saying that she has brought the necessary herbs and asking to use the kitchen. Just a few minutes later, the recovery potion and medicinal broth were ready. Lacey explains how to use it, while everyone else in the house, except for the mother, just listens, amazed at how quickly the medicine was prepared. Meanwhile, the grandmother and her grandson follow the sorceress's instructions. Cargo finally exhales and turns to her. At that moment, the girl is fussing over a chick that is pecking at a blade of grass. She puts the phoenix on her shoulder and approaches the man, saying that if there is not enough herb, she has more home. He replies that this is not the issue. He hands her a bag of coins. He apologizes, saying that this is all he has for now and promises to pay the rest later. Lacey begins to refuse, insisting that she cannot take money for this. But then she remembers Wayne's words about the ability to accept gratitude. So she carefully takes a few coins out of the bag. The man tries to convince her to take more, but she replies that this is enough. Besides, she owes Alan and is happy to be of service. Cargo thanks their savior. He adds that he will tell his son to bring her vegetables again, to which the sorceress asks him to bring less. The head of the family admits that this time it is his fault. After all, they knew the date of the birth in advance from the fortune teller, and they should have been prepared. The mention of the fortune teller interests Lacey. The man explains that when a woman becomes pregnant, they go to the soothsayer to find out the date of birth and a suitable name. Moreover, there is no doctor in the village, so one must be called in advance from the city. Hearing this, the girl asks where the doctor is. Cargo remains silent. He takes her and her son to the river, where the remains of a bridge are visible. It turns out that the rain has caused the water level to rise and washed away the bridge, and the doctor is stuck on the other side, unable to cross. Lacey had studied the map of the area when she was still planning to settle here, or rather, to walk to her new home, so she knew there were no detours and that it was pointless to make a detour as the other bridge could also be washed away. At that moment, a drop fell on the head of the chick sitting on her shoulder. It began to shake itself off, causing its owner slight concern. It started raining again, so she had to hurry as the bank could also collapse at any moment. Lacey asks Cargo and the other townspeople to step back. She promises to try to do something about it. The man tries to stop the witch because it's dangerous, but she doesn't listen, only turning to the phoenix, sending it to Alan's father because of the bird's intolerance of rain. The cub is unhappy with this situation. Therefore, with a little effort, he creates a fiery barrier that protects against the rain. The sorceress is surprised by this, noticing the power of her companion, despite his recent birth. The chick squeaked loudly, but was clearly happy to help. Lacey thanked him and approached the water. They still tried to stop her, until she stepped onto the water's surface, walking across it. The sight amazed those gathered. Cargo was amazed by the calmness with which the witch walked on water. The speed with which she prepared the potion, remembering Alan's words that his new acquaintance was an outstanding magician. But he didn't think she was that good. Lacey, standing in the middle of the river, was trying to figure out the best way to build a crossing. It would be impossible to quickly build a bridge from the nearest trees, and lifting and carrying people with a cart was too risky, as they might not be accustomed to magic. So she decides to use the simplest spell as the most reliable one. Magic swirls around her staff, and the river suddenly freezes over. Everyone is shocked by what is happening, including the inhabitants of the river. Lacey checks the strength of the ice with the tip of her staff. She makes sure that it is thick enough for a car to drive over. She informs the people on shore, but for a while, they remain in a state of shock, until someone finally shouts to Cargo. He steps onto the ice, trembling. He mentally draws a parallel between this Lacey and the Witch of Dawn as he looks at the girl talking to the chick on her staff. They have the same name and the same level of magic, so he begins to suspect that they are one and the same person. But the man quickly dismisses this thought, as the sorceress before him does not resemble the one depicted in paintings, and it is difficult to imagine that this very young lady could have dealt with the demon king himself. Besides, he has more important things to do than ponder such matters, so he runs across the ice to the doctor, saying that he called them and offering to escort them home. Estelle just smiles as she watches this. Sometime after these events, Wayne came to visit Lacey. The girl made tea for him herself, which the guy was happy about. Noticing the pleasant aroma of the drink, she thanks him for the compliment, but admits that he still does it better. Wayne replies that it is more than enough. He also expresses his satisfaction with his friend's lively life. After all, during this time, she saved a dying phoenix, received an egg in gratitude, and is now raising the chick. In addition, she helped the villagers by freezing an entire river. Such a life could even be called chaotic. However, unlike Wayne, Lacey does not see anything unusual in all this. She also asks Wayne if he is sure it is a phoenix. After all, everyone said it was a type of cockatrice. But Wayne confirmed that the chick belonged to the phoenixes, given its fiery crest and tail, characteristic gaze, scarlet and golden feathers, and massive feet. Of course, the young man admitted that he himself was seeing the chick for the first time. After all, phoenixes are so rare that even among adventurers, only a few have seen them. And even a cockatrice is difficult for an ordinary person to encounter. But the young man adds that, on the other hand, it is good that these two species have been confused, because if the truth had come out, it wouldn't have ended with just a few plucked feathers. Such thoughts stress the girl, and she agrees. Wayne says that in any case, he is glad that his herbs are useful, even if it is now a completely different plant. Lacey suggests that the soil here is well suited to magic, so the plants have grown vigorously. The guy replied that it's not just the size, but also the extraordinary quality. Therefore, if such herbs go on sale, there will be an uproar. Lacey assures him that she has no plans to sell them yet, and then she decides to offer her friend some to take with him. After all, it might come in handy during the expedition. Wayne agrees with the likely benefits of such powerful medicine, but he doesn't know how much to pay her for it. Lacey waves it off, because it's his weed to begin with. Besides, for now, they're only being used to feed the little phoenix. It eats a lot, but if asked, it can share. The guy replies that under these circumstances, he agrees. Then he asks if she has given the chicken name. After all, it's awkward to always call it the little one. Lacey lowers her gaze, and she puts her cup of tea down on the saucer. She asks her guest if she can leave for a moment. Soon, the companions approached one of the village houses. It was the house of a fortune teller, whom Cargo had warned in advance about the arrival of the young magician. The man, in gratitude, conveyed to the fortune teller the girl's desire to come and give the chick a name. Before entering the house, Lacey says over her shoulder to Wayne that he could wait for her at home, but he replies that he went with her, just in case. The girl carefully enters the room, takes off her hat, and immediately hears her name, spoken loudly. Alan argues with his father, saying that there's already one Lacey in the village, and there will be confusion. So he suggests the name Ray. Her father replies that he also likes the name Dana. Lacey calls out to them, and they interrupt their discussion. Cargo approaches her, again with gratitude, and asks if she has come for a name for the little phoenix. She confirms this, then asks what is going on. The man blushes and scratches his head. He explains that they couldn't choose a name for the baby, even though it's usually given before birth. Lacey had secretly hoped that they wouldn't choose her name, because when she hears it, her heart skips a beat. At that moment, Alan approaches the sorceress and asks who that is with her. Is that her boyfriend? Meaning Wayne. Lacey began to deny it, but the boy noticed how cute her companion was. Wayne praised him for his keen eye, and the young farmer pointed out the guy's reliability, adding that the witch was lucky despite her weak protests. Alan saw the representative of the Shelonique clan as a completely unremarkable young man because of the masking magic. The sorceress asked her friend not to laugh and to say something about the boy's mistake, but he only concludes that it's fun here. The fortune teller sits in another room, on a chair covered with a blanket, and above her on the wall hangs a wreath of ivy, flowers, and fruits. The fortune teller herself is a small, sweet-looking woman of advanced age. Cargo introduces her to the girl, saying that everyone calls her Baba-sama. He also introduces Lacey to the lady of the house. She beckons the girl closer. Lacey says hello, the woman says hello back and invites her to sit down. The old woman looks at the phoenix in the witch's hands, asking if it needs a name. Receiving an affirmative answer, the seer asks the sorceress herself what name she would like to give the baby. Lacey begins to get nervous. She tries to explain that she can't, which is why she came here. Moreover, she doesn't even know why she was given that name. Lacey doesn't know who gave her that name, and she didn't care. But after being given the name Estelle, she thought about its meaning for the first time, felt its weight, and now cannot bring herself to call herself it in front of others. For these reasons, she considers herself unworthy of doing something so important, giving a name. Baba-sama looks at her. Then she begins to explain that even though it is called a name, she does not invent names. After all, a name is something that parents create, putting their wishes into it, and the child keeps it for life, like a talisman. Her job is only to ask the child if the name chosen by the parents suits them. Usually, she asks about this while the baby is still in the womb, but now the baby is already here. She tells Lacey to ask the baby directly. The girl hesitates slightly, then says the name, Photius. She asks how the little phoenix got such a name, and he, in turn, beams. It jumps up, bumping its head against the girl's face. It continues to jump happily, poking its head into its owner's cheek. So Lacey takes this as consent, adding that it will burst with joy. Baba-sama notes that in the ancient language, this name means flame. So considering its fiery plumage, future passion, radiance, and dazzling brilliance. It's a beautiful name for a phoenix. Lacey smiles at this, even though she is covered in feathers. Wayne, who was watching this, concluded that the decision had been made, and Alan, who was also peeking out of the doorway, sighed because they had been beaten to it. Lacey called her pet by name and said that for convenience, he would be called T. He chirped affirmatively. Wayne asked if they would return. The sorceress agreed, since he was leaving the next day. Then the front door opened, and a voice could be heard saying goodbye to someone. A girl enters the house. She turns to the fortune teller and says that they are leaving soon and she has come to say goodbye. At that moment, she noticed Lacey with her friend. She lets out an enthusiastic cry, recognizing the girl who had been walking along the river. This reaction frightens Lacey. The stranger continues, delighted to meet Lacey. She explains that she is a merchant who comes here regularly, and when the river washed away the bridge, she despaired that her goods would be lost. But the appearance of the magician saved the day, even though she did not have time to express her gratitude, which she does, actually, after finishing her tirade. However, the witch is not used to such a fast pace of speech and does not understand anything. The merchant has already reached out her hands to Lacey, but she only took Wayne's hand, who looked at her with great suspicion. Lacey did not understand the reason for her friend's behavior, and the stranger found it creepy. But she didn't dwell on it for long, happily walking towards the fortune teller while Wayne told his companion about the talkativeness and greed of merchants, so that it was too early for her to encounter such things. The girl replied that there was nothing wrong with that, but then Alan approached them, with Photius sitting on his head, and asked if she was leaving. He said that he and his father were also leaving, as Baba-sama had asked to consult with his mother as well. He returned the chick from his head to his guardian. Then the boy remembers that they will be passing by their house, and offers to pick up some more vegetables. He points to Wayne's strength, so he can handle it. Wayne suddenly realizes that this is the boy who carried vegetables for Lacey. Receiving a positive response, Wayne shakes the boy's hand, expressing his gratitude and asking him to look after Lacey while he is away. Alan agrees, saying that he owes the girl so much that he could never repay her with vegetables in his entire life. From a conversation, the young farmer learns that his benefactor is older than him, whereas he thought they were the same age. In the same conversation, Wayne admits that he is worried about her. While the young people were talking, Lacey felt uncomfortable and pursed her lips. When they finally returned home, Wayne beamed, seeing how many vegetables they had been given. The girl, of course, wondered if she would be able to eat so much. But Wayne reminded her that T also eats vegetables, and with his appetite, there was nothing to worry about. At that moment, Lacey remembers that there was also a person in their group who loved to eat, namely Brooks. Wayne smiled gently. She notes that, in addition to the family that gave her vegetables, many other townspeople greeted the witch. She assumed that these were all the people who had seen her freeze the river. And Wayne can't help but appreciate how confidently the sorceress lives here. The girl opens her eyes wide, asking if he really thinks so. The boy answers in the affirmative because she already has 2 customers in her shop and a whole mountain of food treasures. Lacey beams at these words. Wayne continues, recalling how the witch dispersed the clouds to stop the rain, adding that an ordinary person would never have thought of such a thing. But he is suddenly interrupted. He decides to ask about the roof, which the owner of the house broke with a spell, and she, still beaming, she said she left the hole as it was, which made the guy angry. In the end, Wayne climbed onto the roof himself to patch it up. Lacey, standing below, asks if it's dangerous and offers to help. Wayne replies that there's not much left to do and sends his girlfriend to make tea. The girl mentally notes to herself that she can't leave the broken room like that, even if she doesn't use it. That's why Wayne was worried about her. When she was bound by contract, it was easy. The Dawn Witch only had to play her part. Holy shoes, dishes left lying around after meals, a jug of water that was always full, things that someone took care of while others were left unattended. And even after gaining her freedom, Lacey cannot escape this world. Wayne notices the sorceress's thoughtfulness and waves his hand at her. She responds in kind. Lacey realizes that she is now surrounded by a world she has gained thanks to her friend, and that this world must be cherished and lived more consciously. She calls T inside with her, turning around and glancing over her shoulder at the roof where her former comrade in arms was working. But Lacey has another desire that was born after gaining her freedom, and to fulfill it, she needs to distance herself from Wayne. As soon as the group was assembled to destroy the Demon King, Wayne seemed a little intimidating to Lacey. He kept his distance from the others and always looked at everything with a cold, detached gaze. But this did not last long, or rather, it could not continue, because the elite fighters, selected solely for their strength, turned out to be too peculiar, and the representative of the Shelani clan had no choice but to become the one who united everyone. Daily meals, financial management, and even clothing repairs, everything fell on Wayne's shoulders. And if it weren't for him, their squad would never have made it to the Demon King's castle. Lacey especially relied on him. And even though they had been traveling for a whole year, she still couldn't talk normally with the other members of the group. Now Lacey regrets this. She even tried to write some letters, but many of them were simply thrown aside. The girl can only guess how they felt about her. However, she still has some memories of Brooks, his voice calling out to her. Suddenly, it makes the girl open her eyes wide and sigh. Photius chirped questioningly, looking at his mistress. She rubbed her eyes, realizing that she had dozed off. Then she remembered her guest and went to look for him. She found him on the second floor in the room where T's parent had been kept. The boy was standing on boxes, and the girl asked him what he was doing. Wayne replied that he was checking the roof and checking to see if it was leaking. Lacey said everything was fine, and the little phoenix confirmed it. Wayne climbed down from the boxes and looked at his friend. Seeing that her hair was messy, he asked her to sit down so he could fix it. He insists even when Lacey brushes it off. The girl thinks that even though she has been living in the village for about 6 months now, Wayne continues to visit her. About once a month, although sometimes there are months when he doesn't show up. But considering the distance from the capital, it's still often. And he always does the same thing, namely cooking, cleaning, and fixing the girl's hair, as he is doing now. Lacey turns to Wayne, asking if he's bored. The guy raises his eyebrows. Then he sighs. He understands what she means, but he assures her that everything is fine and that, on the contrary, he is very busy. He just spends all his weekends visiting his girlfriend, and this admission upsets Lacey, who says that's not right. She turns to him, saying that he surely has other things to do. Wayne replies that there are no such things. But it's a matter of priorities, and he asks his friend not to worry, turning her head back to face him. Lacey involuntarily clenches her hands. Meanwhile, T begins to examine the instruments. Even if Wayne says so, he comes to her because he is worried about her, considers her unreliable, and therefore cannot leave her unattended. And in fact, if it weren't for his concern, she would never have realized her desire, probably now living in the Duke's house, just existing from day to day. The girl's memory flashes back to that moment after the engagement was broken off, when they were sitting in a field, and she closes her eyes. That is why she has this desire, for which she will have to distance herself from Wayne, to free him from herself. The girl turns to her friend again, promising to try not to die, to try the store little by little, planning to call his store for all occasions. The guy agrees with all of this, and adds that if anything happens, she can turn to him for help. Lacey nods, although she has decided for herself that if he is around, she will start relying on his care again. Even now, she takes away Wayne's freedom. He is still busy with the girl's hairstyle. Meanwhile, a sad smile touches her lips. She's glad to have met such a good person, although she has to come to terms with the fact that after her wish is granted, moments like this will disappear, and she will be lonely, but she understands the necessity of it. For now, the girl can still afford to lean on Wayne's shoulder. At that moment, a man emerged from the woods and approached Lacey's house. He stopped not far from the porch. He took a deep breath, loud enough for both people in the house in the back room to hear. He called out to the girl. Lacey and Wayne exchanged glances when they heard the familiar voice. They headed for the stairs. The uninvited guest called out to them and announced that he was coming in. As they descended the stairs, the guy and the girl saw Steel Warrior. Noticing them, Brooks was able to confirm his belief that they would be together. He smiled broadly. He also noticed Wayne's cheerfulness and the 2 bumps on Lacey's head, asking if she was okay. This almost terrified the girl, and she began to try to remove them, but of course, nothing worked. Wayne asked his old friend why he had come. With his usual smile, he replied that it was simple. He just wanted to see their faces again. After these words, Lacey gave up trying to untangle her slightly disheveled hair. She looked at the man. Over a small feast they had prepared, Lacey and Wayne explained why they had been away from the capital. Now everything fell into place for Brooks. The Witch of Dawn had moved away. That's why he could only smell Wayne. This statement embarrassed Wayne as he carried another dish. Lacey apologized to Brooks for not warning him about the move. The man waved it off, saying that he himself had shown up unexpectedly. His only regret was the escaped boar he had caught. Brooks thought his prey was already dead and wanted to treat his friends to fresh meat, but they replied that his attention was enough. Wayne says that he could have warned them about his arrival. Brooks explains that he had business in the capital and suddenly decided to visit the other former members of the squad. But since they had met, everything was fine, although there might be some problems. Lacey looks at him with wide eyes, clutching a piece of bread in her hands. He still remembered that the sorceress lived in the capital, even though they had hardly spoken before. The girl is also glad that she sent a letter, which, of course, was not written on the first try. She thanks the man for visiting her, admitting that she wanted to write to him. Brooks reassures her, joking that he dislikes letters as much as Lacey does. He laughs loudly at this. The girl thinks to herself that he may be a good person, but his loud voice still bothers her. Brooks stops laughing, suggests dealing with the letter later, and asks his companions to tell him how they are doing. The former comrades in arms chatted at the table. They discussed everything that had happened since their victory. Brooks did suggest making some tea at one point, but Lacey stopped him. The feast lasted until late in the evening, so they had to light candles. During the conversation, the new guest learned about the breakup of the engagement. He was delighted, almost beaming, as he looked at the person who had contributed to this. Wayne asked him why he was looking at him that way. The man explained that everyone was worried. This slightly surprised the girl. Brooks explained that when Lacey talked about her fiancé, she had a look on her face as if there was no happy future there. He was still almost glowing while Wayne asked him not to look that way. The girl blushed slightly, and she turns to Wayne. She asked him to tell her about himself and his business in the capital. The man began to speak, but quickly the smile slips from his face. He remembers Lacey talking about wanting to open a shop selling all sorts of things, and she leans forward slightly. Brooks says he has a request and offers her an order with the option to refuse if it proves too difficult. He offers her 3 gold coins, showing her the same number of fingers. Lacey is frightened because it is too much, and Wayne frowns. He suggested that Brooks had offered all the money in his wallet, and since it was gold, it must be bonus money. Brooks noted his insight as a hero. He added that he would pay the rest when he returned. Lacey stopped him and asked him to describe the essence of the order. The man replied that he was in trouble, but the girl already understood that and wanted to know the details. Brooks repeated that he was in serious trouble, without saying anything specific. He reiterated the gravity of the situation he was in, so Wayne intervened, saying that they understood. Brooks said he was looking for a way to solve his problem in the capital, but he couldn't explain it. Admitting his inability to do so, he suggested that Lacey go and see for herself. He loudly commands them to go, and when asked about their destination, he replies that they are going to his hometown, the beautiful Tobatsu. He replied that it was his hometown, the beautiful Tobatsu. It was located on the coast and was bustling with life. People socialized with each other, merchants sold their goods, and children played. Lacey was impressed by what she saw, though she noted that it was noisy. Wayne agreed, comparing it to having 100 Brooks around, and asked if something had happened. But the warrior said no, assuring them that it was always like that in the city. Now Wayne and Lacey understood where their friend's character came from, something he himself had not noticed. Still, the man smiled, admitting that it is rare to understand oneself. Tobatsu, Brooks' hometown, is located on the south coast and is famous for its fresh seafood and colorful landscapes. It is a well-known tourist destination. It would take about a month to get here from the village of Plume by cart. But this time, Wayne and Lacey used a horse, while Brooks ran on his own, strangely enough, noticeably outpacing the horse. They also used teleportation devices scattered throughout the region, called sanctuaries, so the journey took only half a day. Wayne was, of course, surprised that Brooks was allowed to use such means of transportation, but he explained that it was because he was a representative of the city. In the darkness of the sanctuary, the travelers tried to make room for themselves, and Brooks asked Lacey and Wayne to move over, as there was no room for the horse. As a result, Lacey hit her head on something, so hard that she started to cry. At that moment, the warrior managed to close the door, and Wayne pulled the girl close to him. Lacey blushes slightly as she recalls this now. Wayne brings her out of her thoughts by asking if she is hot. This scared the girl a lot. The guy tells her to take off her raincoat, as it will get even hotter by lunchtime, and the girl agrees. Brooks goes to take the horse and luggage away. Wayne asks his friend if something happened. She replies that she is worried about tea. He was so eager to stay and look after the house that he was entrusted with the task. Hearing this, the guy assumes that the young phoenix is now sleeping after lunch. The girl agrees. Lacey decides to ask her friend if he is sure he needs to come. After all, he had an expedition planned. Wayne reminds her of what he said before leaving, that if he uses the sanctuaries that are usually inaccessible but are permitted to him by virtue of being a former hero, he will make it in time. So 2 days is no problem for him. Lacey is surprised by the young man's efforts when a woman passing by notices her hat. She began to ask Lacey if she was a tourist, about her companion, and praised her hat, saying that it was an excellent solution against such a scorching sun. At that moment, Wayne hears a voice behind him asking if he can help her. It was Brooks who had returned. He explains that the locals are nice but pushy. But Lacey didn't like that. The passerby tries to give the girl one of the flowers from her basket, saying that she just picked it and that it is a local variety. Such persistence frightens Lacey, causing her to shrink and tremble. Wayne replies to Brooks that it is not dangerous and is a good opportunity to overcome her shyness. After all, even if it has become easier for Lacey in the village, it is not quite enough, as the current situation confirms. Brooks smiles and concludes that Wayne is also trying, which surprises him a little, and he dismisses these words. By the time they were ready to continue on their way, Lacey was covered in flowers given to her by a stranger. The guys called out to the poor girl, and Brooks offered to show them around the city. Soon they found themselves at a fountain with a statue of Brooks. He stood in front of it, striking the same pose and asking his companions what they thought. Wayne concludes that the statue is really huge, and Lacey agrees with him, saying that it is impressive. At that moment, the townspeople who were at the fountain noticed the man and ran up to him. People began to ask him about his trip to the capital and congratulate him on his return, and Brooks smiled in response, promising to tell them about his adventures along the way. He paid special attention to the children, carrying them on his hands. Lacey and Wayne smiled as they watched from the sidelines. When he was finally released, Brooks headed over to his friends, apologizing for the delay. The girl replied that it was no big deal, and Wayne noted the special love the townspeople had for their former comrade-in-arms. He smiled sheepishly but confirmed what she said. He explained that the statue and fountain had been erected when he returned after defeating the Demon King as a token of gratitude. Brooks also tried to persuade Wayne to remove his camouflage magic for at least a minute, so that he too could be carried on people's shoulders, but the guy categorically refused. After a while, they find themselves in a part of town where they hardly meet anyone. It is noticeably quieter there, which Lacey notices. Wayne suggests that this is because of the proximity of the port, as such places are livelier in the mornings. Hearing the conversation, Brooks presses his lips together. He turns to them. He says it's time to tell them why they came to Tobatsu. He invites them to his dojo. It is located at the foot of a small cliff and is surrounded by trees. His guests see something like this for the first time, and Wayne notes the peacefulness and tranquility of the place. Brooks replies that it is still a place for training the body and spirit. He invites his friends to come in, but warns them to take off their shoes, which surprises Lacey, but the man explains to her that there are countries with such a culture, and this building is modeled after it. He announces his return, and Lacey and Wayne see him. Inside, a group of people are honing their strikes on straw-covered poles. Lacey asks if they are students. He receives an affirmative answer, and the owner of the martial arts school adds that people come here from all over the country, and recently, people from abroad have also begun to arrive. Lacey is amazed by what she sees. Brooks participated in the campaign to destroy the Demon King as a warrior. While most candidates came with weapons, he showed up at the selection with his bare hands and demonstrated overwhelming strength. This was made possible by a special martial art called Qigong. By training the soul and filling the body with Qi energy, one can make the body as hard as steel or run faster than a horse. At least that's what they say. Unlike Qigong, which changes the body from within, magic essentially changes the outside through spells. And because of the opposition between Qi and mana, it is believed that it is impossible to learn both together. Wayne recalls that opening his own school was his wish as a reward for the journey, which Brooks confirms. He says that the screening process for founding a school is very strict, and a youngster like him wouldn't even be allowed on the doorstep. But he was confident that he had enough grounds for permission, which he proved on the hike. And he was allowed to do so a little earlier. Lacey smiles after listening to her friend and finally understanding. From the very beginning of the trip, Brooks often said that he wanted to open his own school and make it the most popular one. At the time, she listened to this as if it had nothing to do with her, but now Lacey had a desire, and she wonders if she could have participated in that conversation. Next, Lacey tries to remember what the others dreamed of. Suddenly, as if remembering something, she looked at Wayne, but said nothing. At that moment, Brooks suggested they get down to business. He placed a package on the floor in front of them. At first, the guests did not understand what it was, or rather what was wrong with it. Brooks sighed nervously. He suggested that they try it themselves. He apologized in advance to his students and asked them to get ready. Before Lacey could ask what they needed to prepare for, the man began to unroll the cloth. From the object that was there, or rather, the vambrace, there was a terrible and very strong smell, causing Lacey and Wayne to close their eyes in disgust. Then Brooks said that he wanted to ask them to deal with this stench, although his former comrades-in-arms had already seen it, or rather smelled it. He explains that his school uses bare hands as weapons, so there is usually no need for this. But for beginners, steel vambrace are best suited for building up physical strength. However, when used, they become the source of this smell. At first, it was tolerable, but lately, the stench has been spreading throughout the city. At these words, Lacey looked up at Brooks. He went on to say that the port is empty precisely because the smell lingers there. But there is a chance that it will spread throughout the city. People say it bothers them, but Brooks doesn't believe it, or at least doesn't want to. This is bad for tourism, and various measures have been taken, but obviously they have not been effective. The man clenched his fists. He understands that ideally he should move the dojo, but opening a school in this particular location is his lifelong dream. That's why he turned to Lacey, asking her to do something about the smell for the sake of his dream, and asking if she would take on such a selfish request. Lacey hesitated for a moment, pursing her lips. Then, with determination, she agrees to take on the job. Wayne gazes into the distance as the sea breeze blows around him. Seagulls soar in the sky. He notes the good weather that day, and despite the wind, the smell isn't so strong. Lacey and Wayne stand on the steep shore, leaning on the railing. The guy looks at the witch with a smile. He decides to find out if she has come up with a solution, but he finds his friend completely depressed, from which he concludes that she hasn't. Almost crying, she talks about Brooke's request, looking at the sea where fish are splashing. Lacey admits that she agreed on the spur of the moment, but was confident that she could handle it. But everything she came up with, Brooks had already tried. The gloves were washed with super soap, sterilized, and stored in a different place. In addition, according to the customer, the sea breeze complicated the situation. Because of this, the smell that was carried away from the dojo at night returned during the day. This became clear during the discussion of the order at the dojo. Of course, Lacey doubted that wind alone was enough to cause such a stench. So Brooks suggested that it was caused by a huge kraken that had settled in the coastal waters. According to the locals, in addition to breathing through its gills, it also yawns, drawing magical energy from the air. Lacey raised her eyebrows slightly as she listened to her former comrade-in-arms. They come to the conclusion that due to the incompatibility of qigong and magic, when they collide inside the kraken, the smell of the former intensifies and returns even stronger. Still, no matter how smelly the gloves are, they wouldn't cause this on their own. With all this, the sea monster is in hibernation, and when the period of activity begins, it will get even worse. Wayne asked if it was possible to kill the kraken. He received a negative answer, because it does not cause any other harm. Brooks also remembered something. This sea creature gives people the tips of its tentacles, which are used to make a local delicacy, and offered the guests of the city to try it. They were amazed by the generosity of the magical beast. Now, while the boy and the young which are standing on the shore, Wayne suggests using wind magic instead of vambrace purification, which will carry the smell away from the kraken. But Lacey dismisses this idea, arguing that a method that requires her to always be nearby is not a solution. They needed something that the people from the dojo could do themselves and that Brooks hadn't tried yet. Wayne thinks about it. Then he asks if they can use magical items. After all, you don't need magic to use them. Lacey looks away from the sea and at her friend. A magical artifact is a tool created by embedding magical formulas into a magical stone extracted from the body of a monster. It is processed so that anyone can use it. Lacey likes this idea. She could indeed make such an item for Brooks. But she immediately dismisses the idea, as a normal magic stone would not be powerful or large enough, and Wayne agrees with her. The girl sighs, realizing that she has underestimated the task. She looks down at the water. If she fails, Brooks will surely smile and forgive her. Even the lack of payment doesn't scare her. But what will happen to his dream, his students, the people who respect him? And these thoughts make Lacey realize her own helplessness. Wayne notices that the girl is at an impasse, and, before she has a chance to say anything, he says that it's not that she's useless. This makes her look at him meaningfully. He explains that he is not saying this to comfort her. Wayne suggests that she consider how powerful magic might be, but that not everyone can become the best magician in the country, even if told to do so. She was able to, so she's already amazing. Lacey resists this statement. She turns to him. She almost shouts that she can't even talk to anyone except him normally, and if it weren't for Wayne, she would have died somewhere in a doorway. So the girl doesn't understand how such a person can be considered amazing. Lacey is even more shocked that Wayne agrees with her. The guy smiles slightly, reminding her that she is still trying to fix it and adding that she needs to become more confident. Lacey looks at him with a barely noticeable tear in her eye. The guy's words to her are always warm. Not everything he says is true in her opinion, of course. The witch doesn't consider herself that wonderful. But he doesn't let her give up, and so the sorceress realizes that she cannot rely on him all the time. Feeling a little better, Lacey says she'll try again. And at that moment, her stomach starts to growl. This embarrasses the girl, as she doesn't understand what the sound is at first. But Wayne immediately realizes that it's lunchtime. It is absolutely unacceptable for him to skip a meal, and he even scolded himself for forgetting about it. Despite Lacey's protest that now is not the time to eat, because they're leaving tomorrow, Wayne dragged her along with him. He insisted that there was nothing more important than eating. In one of the city's most popular shops, they bought a dish consisting of balls and sauce and skewers for easy consumption. After trying it, Lacey burned herself a little, as the dish was hot, and according to her companion, it was the very same Kraken delicacy. On the outside, it had a crispy coating, and on the inside, there was tender meat, and it was quite tasty. They also bought some regular fried squid in a sweet and spicy sauce, noting that it was juicy and springy. Lacey asked the guy about the caviar, not knowing what this transparent and popping thing was, and he explained, adding that it goes well with rice, and, in general, that fresh fish is a privilege of a seaside town. They ordered a few more dishes. After eating everything, the guests thanked him for the meal. However, Lacey had to fend off the shop owner, who offered more servings, while Wayne finished his dessert. As they walked down the street, the girl voiced her suspicion that she had eaten twice as much as they had bought, while Wayne noted the generosity and business acumen of the local merchants, which was top-notch. Lacey agreed and looked around. Tobatsu is such a vibrant, lively city that Lacey promises herself she will do everything she can to keep it that way. In a fighting mood, Lacey declares that when they return, she will try again. Night has fallen unnoticed, descending on the city. The tired girl was already in bed, falling asleep. Through her sleep, she complained about the smell, and Wayne, who was in the room with her at that moment, carefully cleaned her hat. He smiled faintly as he looked at his girlfriend. She was still muttering that she needed to come up with something, and Wayne adjusted her blanket. He quietly left the room. In the hallway, Brooks called out to him. He asked if Lacey was asleep. The guy replied that yes. Lacey had run around all day and was tired, so he asked Brooks to come back the next day if he needed anything. But Brooks replied that it was more of a matter for Wayne himself, and when Wayne turned to him in confusion, he showed him a large bottle of what was obviously some kind of alcohol. He showed him a decent-sized bottle of what was obviously some kind of alcohol. And in the distance, beyond the trees, the sea splashes, the sky is studded with stars. And two former comrades in arms were pouring spirits into mugs. Brooks smiled, saying that it was the first time they had drunk together, to which Wayne replied that he had been underage during the trip and therefore unable to do so. The man is slightly surprised and suggests that they consider their little feast a celebration of his coming of age. Although, according to Wayne, it's too late for that. Brooks dismisses this, considering it a good reason anyway, and proposes a toast to this event, to Lacey's new path, and to all of them in general, raising his mug. The young man also raises his mug, adding about his companion's opening of a martial arts school, and they lightly clink their mugs together. They continue to sit under the soft light of the lantern on the terrace when Brooks asks Wayne how Lacey's order is going. The guy was eating some snacks at that moment and looked up at the person sitting opposite him. He replied that Lacey was at an impasse and was probably even thinking about it in her sleep. The girl was indeed tormented by dreams, though they were related to flowers, the Kraken, and the little Phoenix tea. Brooks feels guilty about this, but Wayne reassures him that it's a good reason for Lacey to get out of the house. Brooks clenched the glass in his hand, spilling a little liquid onto the table. He is still convinced that Lacey is afraid of him, at least based on her behavior during the trip, so he wonders if Wayne was looking for a reason for this. Shouldn't he have chosen someone else? But the guy replies that this is precisely why Brooks was chosen. After all, if Lacey is going to run her own business, she can't only deal with people who are easy to get along with, such as Alan. Another argument is that Brooks is their former comrade, with whom they spent a lot of time, so he was the perfect candidate. The man poured Wayne some more alcohol, agreeing. Brooks smiles as he looks at the man sitting across from him, and suddenly he starts asking if he is still the same. But then he corrects himself, asking if they're still the same. Wayne, who was drinking from his mug at that moment, looked up at Brooks with a puzzled look. And Brooks asks an even more unexpected question, namely, does Wayne love Lacey? The guy chokes. He covers his mouth with his hand. Then he exhales, denying it. Brooks smiles slightly, picking up one of the sandwiches. He asked if Wayne realized how much he cared about her. He used the young man's affirmative answer as confirmation of his words. At the same time, he stuffed the snack he had taken earlier into his mouth. Wayne still agrees that he has special feelings for her. It was respect for the girl's magical skills, sympathy for her past, a desire to protect her because of her fragility, and something else. Something warm and tender that the guy felt when he remembered the image of the Witch of Dawn. He lowers his head, hiding his reddened face and propping his head up with his hand. After a pause, he says he doesn't understand what Brooks is talking about, and the man, smiling slightly, decides not to continue the topic. With the onset of morning, the air is filled with birdsong. Lacey woke up, sat up in bed, and stretched, realizing that she had fallen asleep immediately the night before. But, oddly enough, she feels fine. Now she understands what Wayne meant when he told her to eat her fill and sleep a lot. Changing from her nightgown into her everyday dress, the girl left the room, finding that everyone was still asleep. So, she tied her hair in a bow. She heads to the kitchen. Just as she is frying eggs, Wayne and Brooks wake up. After breakfast, prepared by Lacey. She helped wash the vambrace again. At the same time, Wayne gathered all the things he needed. He loaded them onto his horse, and when he was done packing, it was already time to return. Lacey sat nearby, saddened that the 2 days had passed too quickly, and she still hadn't found a solution to Brooke's problem. Wayne said he had to go on a mission, so he suggested that the girl stay a little longer. But she refused with a smile. She explains that she can think about it at home. Besides, T can't be left alone for long. The little phoenix is clearly missing him. Wayne can't help but agree with his girlfriend's reasoning. His expression changes slightly as he tells Lacey that the expedition will be long and he won't be able to visit for a while. Lacey understands everything and asks Wayne not to overwork himself, and the guy, in turn, asks her not to push herself too hard. He said this very sternly. He takes a breath and collects his thoughts. He adds, louder and a little more sharply, that Lacey needs to relax more, eat well, and rest. She also needs to find a hobby and enjoy every day. After all, good work comes from good life. He asked if she understood everything. The girl, touched by his words, answered affirmatively. At the same time, she called Wayne mommy, but out loud, which shocked him greatly. The young man is indignant, saying that he does not remember giving birth to her, and that she should at least call him dad in that case. She makes a mental note to keep that in mind. Then the guy climbs onto his horse, putting his feet in the stirrups. He asks if Lacey is taking Brooks back. The girl confirms this, saying that they should meet at this place. Wayne asks her to say hello to him and turns his horse around, while the girl asks him to take care of himself. He rides away. Wayne looks back over his shoulder, remembering Brooks' question from the night before. Does he love Lacey? He presses his lips together, thinking that it doesn't matter, as his feelings are his own. Meanwhile, in the village of Plume, at Lacey's mansion, Photius, left in charge, was keeping house. He checked the front door and windows. Satisfied with himself, he headed to the backyard garden to eat some magical herbs. But he didn't notice that one of the bushes was moving, and someone was watching. At the same time, Lacey returned with Brooks. The girl expresses her gratitude to the man for seeing her home and asks if he would like to come in and rest. Brooks smiles brightly and waves his hand dismissively, saying that it's no big deal to him. The girl lowers her gaze. She says she will contact him about the order. He agrees, and then she is strangely silent afterwards. After saying goodbye to Brooks, Lacey enters the house, announcing that she is back, thanking T for looking after the house, and mentioning the gifts. Suddenly, something jumps out in front of her. It turns out to be a boar with a young phoenix on its head, which is squeaking happily. Lacey is shocked that there are more animals in the house, so Photius decides that an explanation is needed. He briefly explains that his new friend, the boar, is a proud warrior who lives in the nearby forest. However, the other day, he lost to a random traveler. Although the traveler managed to escape, his pride was hurt, and the forest dweller began to guard the mansion in search of an opportunity to take revenge. And T, as the eldest, could not ignore this, which led to a fierce battle between them. Then, under the banner of friendship, peace prevailed. Lacey did not understand anything from the whole story, as the animals spoke in their own language. But she accepted the presence of the new inhabitant of the house, only warning them to wipe their paws before entering the room. Naturally, the animals agreed. Lacey took off her hat and hung it on a chair. She also took off her travel bag, which she placed on the table, and several shiny stones spilled out of it. The girl was going to continue working on the order. In the end, she decided to reconsider the option of a magical artifact, which she had already rejected once. After all, Tobatsu was too far away, and even using the sanctuaries, it was too far to travel. She and Brooks agreed that the solution should be one that anyone could use, without relying on Lacey's abilities. This meant that creating an artifact was the simplest and most logical solution. In Tobatsu, the girl managed to buy magical stones, one of which she was twirling in her hands. When Wayne first suggested the idea, Lacey refused because of the limitations of the magic that could be contained in stone. That is, as mentioned earlier, only simple and small-scale spells could be put into such an item. But considering her past experience, clearing fields and cleaning up, which Lacey had previously considered impossible with magic, eliminating odors didn't seem so impossible. So, all that was left was to try and make mistakes. Gathering all her determination, Lacey picked up a pen and set to work. She drew up a bunch of diagrams, made notes, crossed out what she didn't like. In the end, she crumpled it up and threw one sheet behind her. T knocked the sheet away with his wings toward the boar, and the boar accidentally kicked it toward Lacey with its front hooves. Turning around, the girl saw her two companions tossing the crumpled paper back and forth like a ball. Lacey smiles as she watches this, noticing that Photius looks happy even on his own. But together, they can do more, and it's even more fun. Like now, when both animals are trying to build a pyramid out of bodies. When it was time to eat, it turned out that they had grown larger, happily eating the medicinal herbs bred by Lacey. This gave her the idea of expanding her plantation. Lacey cleared some more space in her backyard, which she thought was sufficient, and infused it with magic. According to her, these plants grow quickly. She immediately thought about planting vegetables. But at that very moment, anxiety overwhelms her and envelopes her in a heavy embrace. Lacey stops herself abruptly, as now is not the time to be gardening. She hasn't come up with anything, and while she idles, Brooke suffers. The girl decides that she is running away from reality, and there is no time for that. Lacey is completely lost, plunged into anxiety. But amid these self-deprecating thoughts, Wayne's words about being kinder to herself come to mind. All his words of advice before his departure calm the witch. Very soon, she finds herself lying under the canopy of a large tree. Her boots and staff are lying nearby, and the girl has placed her folded cloak under her head. She slowly opens her eyes, noticing the smell of flowers. It was a gift for tea. Lacey herself chose the seeds of a plant called raka, which blooms in Teratidin. And despite her fears that the flowers would not take root due to the different climate, they took well to the soil, improved by magic, and now she has a Rayal flower bed in the corner of her backyard. And this flower bed has already been chosen by a boar and a phoenix. And that makes Lacey very happy. She spent a long time deciding whether to bring food or flowers to her feathered companion. A sudden gust of wind blew away several petals and flowers, carrying them over the animals' heads toward the crouching sorceress, along with a pleasant aroma. She is delighted by this sight, and the smell reminds her of the sweet old lady who first gave her these flowers and wove them into her hair. And then an idea came to Lacey. A few days later, while Lacey was talking to her pets, she heard someone calling her name very loudly. Almost immediately, Brooks burst into her house, crying with happiness and thanking her for saving him. Lacey was quite frightened and shocked by this intrusion, because she had only sent him the bag yesterday with the help of a paper bird. The man, holding the girl by the hands, said that because of his overwhelming emotions, he had rushed off and did not notice how he had reached the sorceress's residence. She laughed, surprised by this. At that moment, the boar peered tensely at the guest from around the corner, because it was Brooks who had defeated him before he ended up in Lacey's mansion. Brooks showed a small bag in his palm, which turned out to be aromatic, and the man admits that he could not even imagine that such a tiny thing would solve the problem. He asked if it was the scent of the raka flower. He received an affirmative answer. Lacey says she thought about covering up the stench with a strong scent, one that was familiar to the townspeople. Brooks grinned, noting that it wasn't that simple, because he himself had also tried to mask the smell with other scents. Lacey unties the bag and says she didn't do anything special. She shows 2 small stones in her palm. She explains that she sewed 2 types of magic stones into the bags, one with a cleansing spell and the other with a wind spell. She conducted experiments with tea and the boar, discovering that simply adding another scent makes the stench unbearable. Therefore, you must first purify the air around you, and only then fill it with the scent of flowers. After the girl's story, Brooks suddenly asked her to hold out her hand, and when she did, he placed 5 coins in her palm. Lacey was surprised. She protested that it was too much, but Brooks replied that it was just right. In his opinion, gratitude should not be measured in money. He would like to give more and asks her to accept it. Lacey looks at him, her eyes wide open. Then she pressed her hand to her chest, saying that in that case, she would accept the payment with gratitude. Brooks was silent for a moment. Suddenly, he turns to Lacey with a question. Aren't they comrades anymore? She mentally agreed with this. After all, the journey was over, and the team that had brought them together had long since broken up. Brooks stammered something, while Lacey admitted to herself that even though she understood this, it was still hard to hear. So hard that tears welled up in her eyes. Then the man suggests that they become friends. Lacey looked at him in surprise, and he raised his hands in front of him, quickly adding that he wasn't insisting. And if Lacey herself didn't mind, they could write to each other, although Brooks would prefer to come and visit each other without any formalities. He says that now that it's done, they are strangers to each other, and that would make him sad. At the same time, he believes that Lacey doesn't like people like him, which is why he didn't dare to mention it earlier. But now, having mustered up the courage, he asks how the girl feels about it. Lacey looks at the man for a few seconds, before a tear rolls down her cheek. Her emotions cause her to shake, and she involuntarily drops her hands, spilling the coins, which fall to the floor with a clink. The sound snapped them both out of their stupor, causing them to crouch down on the floor in unison to gather the scattered money. While Lacey was doing this, tears continued to fall involuntarily from her eyes. At the same time, the sorceress thought about how, after the end of the journey, she believed that there was no further road, that would remain only a vivid memory. But, as it turns out now, the connection continues. Memories can be created in the present reality. By the time the girl came to this conclusion, they had already collected the coins, and Brooks carefully returned them to her. With a smile, Lacey promised to visit Tobatsu again and write letters. Brooks smiled in agreement. Soon they said goodbye, waving to each other, while the boy was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief, as his former rival had finally left. Sometime after these events, Alan visited her. Both teenagers sat in Lacey's backyard. T played with the boar a little way off, the boy ate some fruit, and Lacey stared into space, hugging her knees. She began to enjoy a life full of tranquility, but obviously it was strange for her, so she mentally asked Wayne if this was normal at all. Her guest notices her deep thoughtfulness as he finishes his fruit and calls out to the girl. He says that her boyfriend hasn't been around for a long time, which makes him think that he has dumped her and that Lacey is sad because of it. The girl replies that if he is talking about someone who came recently, then he is not her boyfriend. But then Lacey realizes that Alan didn't hear her because he starts asking her what color her boyfriend's hair is. Since he saw a blonde guy, her father says he's brown-haired and someone else says he's brunette. Without waiting for an answer, the boy blushes and voices a shocking guess. Lacey has a bunch of boyfriends, but the girl calmly refutes this, saying that she doesn't have any, while thinking to herself that this is a side effect of the magic of disguise. It forces people to see the most inconspicuous face, and everyone has their own idea of what that face looks like, so different people see it differently. Finally, taking Lacey's words into account, the young man asks if it's not because of a guy that she's sad, then what is the reason? Lacey replies gloomily that she decided to open a shop for all occasions, but there are no new orders. She would like to get at least one order. Alan understood the essence of the problem. He asked what order she had before. Lacey has to think about what to say. It would be difficult to explain about the local cockatrice, which turned out to be a phoenix, and he knows about the second time she helped his mother give birth. So she showed him the bag, explaining that she had made it to combat the stench. The boy took the magical item in his hands with admiration, now understanding the reason for the pleasant smell in Lacey's house. The girl offers the boy one, and Alan agrees and thanks her, deciding to make his mother happy. At that moment, someone was quietly sneaking up on the teenagers in the bushes. A merchant whom Estelle had already met at the fortune teller's house emerges from the bushes. She is no less delighted with what she sees. Finally emerging from the bushes, she asks to take a closer look. The teenagers turn to the girl and agree, handing the bag to the merchant. While the stranger was examining the item, talking to herself, the witch asked her friend who she was. Alan reminded her that she was a traveling merchant who sometimes visited the village, and also where exactly they had seen her before. Finishing her examination, the girl said that it was too modest to call the thing in her hand just a scented bag. It was a real magical artifact. She asked if Lacey had made it herself, expressing her admiration once again. When Lacey confirmed this, the merchant began to ask Lacey if she had any more. Could she make more? And would she be willing to sell her similar sachets and in larger quantities? Thanks for watching. Write your feedback in the comments. If you like the story, please like and subscribe. See you soon.